Story 1. Came home to find all her things gone. Found my soulmate. I'm done with this boring marriage, the note from my wife said. I stayed silent. Then 48 hours later, her frantic calls blew my phone as reality finally hit her. Hey Reddit. So my wife thought she had the perfect exit strategy, but ended up completely screwing herself instead due to her miscalculations. Buckle up, this one's wild. So I, 31 male, came home early from this livestock auction in Denver mid-October. The event was supposed to run through the weekend, but prices were trash and barely any quality stock was moving. Decided to bail early Thursday afternoon, thinking I'd surprise my wife Vicky, 29 female, with dinner at this fancy steakhouse she'd been dropping hints about for months. We desperately needed the time together. Married for 5 years, together for almost 8, things had definitely shifted between us lately. Not like openly hostile or anything, just different. That subtle change when someone's heart isn't in it anymore, but they're going through the motions. The minute I pulled up our long gravel driveway, something felt off. Her car was there, but no lights were on despite the early evening shadows stretching across our property. Our Australian shepherd, Tucker, didn't come running out to greet me like he always did. I stepped inside our place, and it was way too quiet. Our farmhouse was never silent. Vicky always had some home renovation show playing, or her favorite country playlist, or was FaceTiming loudly with her friends. But this was cemetery quiet. Called her name twice. Nothing. Started walking through our house. A renovated 1920s farmhouse on this 15-acre ranch we'd bought 3 years ago when land outside the city was still reasonably priced. First thing I noticed was her favorite designer jacket missing from the antique coat rack by the door, the one I'd saved up 3 months to buy her last Christmas. Then her riding boots gone. The key hook where her personalized keychain usually dangled was empty. As I made my way upstairs, each step on our creaky pine floors felt heavier than the last. Our bedroom closet was half empty, hangers askew like someone had grabbed armfuls of clothes in a hurry. All her designer outfits gone. Her expensive makeup vanished from the bathroom counter we'd just installed last month. Her nightstand was cleared of the romance novels she devoured weekly. Then I spotted it. A note on our kitchen island, written in her perfect cursive handwriting on the personalized stationery her mother had given her. Found someone who really gets me? He's my soulmate. This boring marriage isn't working anymore. Moved in with him. Lawyer will contact you about divorce stuff. Just like that. 5 years of marriage ended with a hastily scribbled note. No explanation, no apology. Nothing but cold dismissal like I was some random guy she'd met at a bar. The strangest part? I didn't explode. Should have been punching walls, calling her nonstop, something dramatic. Instead, I sat at our reclaimed wood kitchen table, feeling oddly calm, and called my attorney, then my older brother Mike. Deep down, I think I'd been preparing for this moment for months without admitting it to myself. The changes in Vicky had been subtle but consistent. It started when she befriended Stacy, her new co-worker at the real estate office. Stacy, the walking midlife crisis wrapped in Lululemon. 2 divorces, 3 sugar daddies, and 1 fake business. If bad influence was a person, it'd be her. She drove a leased Mercedes she couldn't afford, and constantly posted those inspirational quotes about leveling up and knowing your worth on social media. Within weeks of their friendship, Vicky changed her hair from natural brown to freaking platinum with pink streaks, overhauled her wardrobe, and started talking about how we needed to upgrade our lifestyle. Suddenly, my wife was spending $400 on Botox, buying designer purses I'd never heard of, and coming home after midnight from girls' nights, smelling like she'd doused herself in perfume. She'd started making mysterious weekend work trips to show properties that never seemed to result in actual sales. I once checked her calendar out of curiosity. 3 showings at luxury condos, all with Stacy tagged as backup agent, except the office didn't know anything about those listings. And apparently, backup agent also means drinks and spa selfies. Our intimacy vanished completely. If I tried to kiss her, she'd turn her cheek. Any attempt at romance was met with excuses about headaches or being tired. Then came the comments about our boring rural lifestyle, how we never did anything exciting, how her friends lived in luxury condos while she was stuck playing farmer on our ranch. My buddy once told me, if her best friend's a wreck, she's just on a delay. I should have listened. Stacy was the warning label and I ignored it. Meanwhile, I was working 60-hour weeks managing livestock auctions across 3 states, coming home to feed horses, fix fencing, and maintain our property while she was networking at upscale bars with Stacy and her divorced friends. I even took on extra weekend auctions to save for the kitchen renovation she'd been begging for. Finished it last month. Apparently not enough to keep her interested. Mike arrived 45 minutes after I called, despite living an hour away. Brought a stack of pizzas, even though food was the last thing on my mind. He's 5 years older, settled with twins and a steady construction business. Always been the steady one watching out for me. He examined the note silently, then offered to go find her. The protective big brother is ready to cause a scene. I shook my head. We sat on the wraparound porch talking until nearly midnight, him distracting me with stories about his kid's latest soccer tournament and problems with a subcontractor. When he finally left, promising to return tomorrow, I wandered through our dark house, looking at all the photos still hanging on the walls, hiking in Colorado, ziplining in Mexico for her birthday, standing proudly in front of this house the day we closed on it. Memories that now seemed like scenes from someone else's life. Tucker finally emerged from wherever he'd been hiding and pressed against my leg, sensing something was wrong. I scratched behind his ears, grateful for the company. She pulled away in small ways that stacked up. Late nights out, dodging affection with excuses, headaches, exhaustion. I kept reaching for something that wasn't there anymore. Turns out I was sleeping next to a stranger with a 5-year exit plan. My lawyer, Dan, is this former rodeo champion who rode with my dad back in the 90s. He transitioned to real estate law after a bad fall broke his pelvis and helped us purchase our ranch, 15 acres with a renovated farmhouse about 30 minutes outside the city limits. We nabbed it for $380,000, which was an absolute steal even 3 years ago. Property values in our county have nearly doubled since 4 major tech companies started building campuses nearby, bringing in waves of California transplants with cash to burn. I drove to Dan's office first thing Friday morning, skipping the auction wrap-up I was supposed to attend. His office exists in a time capsule, weathered cowhide chairs with brass tack details, faded photos of him on legendary bulls at the '92 National Finals Rodeo, a mounted 12-point buck he got on his 50th birthday hunt. The place smells like leather conditioner, coffee, and old paperwork. Dan was surprised to see me before our scheduled meeting about some auction paperwork. I explained everything: the note, the missing clothes, the complete blind side of it all. Told him I needed to protect the ranch. He nodded and pulled up our property documents. After several minutes of searching through county records, his expression shifted dramatically. "Well, I'll be damned," he muttered. "According to the records, I was the sole owner of the entire property. Vicky's name wasn't on the deed at all. Not as co-owner, not even on a rider. I couldn't believe it. We bought it together and used money from both our accounts for the down payment. We'd pooled our savings. $42,000 from me, $28,000 from her, for the 20% down to avoid PMI. And Dan checked 3 separate databases, pulling up digital copies of the final documents. Everything was in my name only. The deed, the mortgage, the mineral rights, everything. My signature was the only one that appeared on any binding document. It made no sense until Dan pointed out that as a real estate agent, Vicky would have known exactly what she was doing. She guided the paperwork exactly where she wanted it to go. The question was why she deliberately kept her name off a valuable asset. But that wasn't all. Dan found she owned another property in her name only, a lakefront cabin purchased approximately 2 years ago for $175,000. My stomach dropped. 2 years ago, we were in the middle of renovating our master bathroom and upgrading the horse stables. We'd been eating microwaved food for some weeks to save on materials. Where had she gotten that kind of money? And how had she hidden an entire property purchase? According to the records, she paid $125,000 cash with a $50,000 mortgage, purchased through an LLC first, then transferred to her personal ownership 6 months later. The more Dan dug, the darker the picture became. He found a pattern of systematic transfers from our joint checking account to her personal savings over the past 30 months. Never large enough to trigger my attention. $200 one week, $350 another, $500 around tax refund time, but totaling approximately $22,300 over time. My livestock commission earnings funding her secret escape plan. Dan removed his glasses and fixed me with a direct look. He'd handled nearly 500 divorces over his career. This wasn't impulsive behavior. These records showed someone methodically planning an exit strategy for years. The separate property, the hidden transfers, keeping her name off your assets, this was calculated. Vicky always handled our finances. She said I was too disorganized. I didn't think much of it until Dan found consistent transfers from our joint account into hers over 30 months. Just a few hundred at a time, barely noticeable. Add that to a lakefront cabin she bought under an LLC and later transferred into her name, and it was clear. She'd been building her escape fund for years. "What do we do now?" I asked, feeling simultaneously like the world's biggest fool and strangely relieved to understand what had been happening. Actually, nothing, Dan said with a small, knowing smile. We wait. She'll contact you as soon as she consults a lawyer and realizes the ranch is solely in your name. If my guess is right, she's been operating under the assumption you'll have to sell and split proceeds. Exactly 48 hours after discovering the note, my phone exploded with activity. Calls, texts, voicemails, all from Vicky, starting precisely at 10:15 Sunday morning. I was out in the east pasture, fixing a section of fence that Tucker had discovered was loose enough to squeeze through, when they started flooding in. One notification after another, each message more urgent than the last. First voicemail was all business, the same tone she used when calling potential buyers about property listings. She needed to discuss the ranch immediately. By the second voicemail, irritation was seeping through about why I wasn't answering. The third had desperation. We needed to move quickly on selling the ranch before the winter market slowdown. The fourth accused me of being childish for ignoring her. By the sixth call, her composure had completely dissolved into pleading. Like adults? The irony of that request from someone who ended a 5-year marriage with a hastily scribbled note wasn't lost on me. I forwarded each message to Dan without responding. He texted back immediately. Perfect strategy. Continue radio silence. She's just realizing she miscalculated badly. Let her stew. Around 6:30 that evening, Jack Wilcox, Vicky's father, called. Unlike my strained relationship with her mother, who always hinted I wasn't quite successful enough for her daughter, Jack and I had genuinely bonded. A retired mechanical engineer, he taught me everything I knew about restoring vintage engines. We'd spent countless weekends in his immaculate garage working on his prized '67 Chevy C10, while Vicky and her mother went shopping at the upscale outdoor mall. He started the call clearly agitated, saying Vicky was having a complete meltdown, claiming I'd locked her out of her own home and wouldn't discuss settlement terms. I took a deep breath and methodically explained everything. Coming home early, finding the empty closets, the cold note, discovering the hidden lakeside cabin she'd purchased without my knowledge, the systematic draining of our joint account over years. Complete silence on his end as I laid out the facts. When he finally responded, his voice was heavy with disappointment. Apparently, she'd told her parents they had been having problems for months and mutually decided to separate. Said I became verbally abusive when she brought up dividing assets fairly. They'd been letting her stay in their guest room because she claimed I threatened to change the locks if she came back. That manipulation made my blood boil, but I kept my tone even. None of that was remotely true. The note I found was the only communication we'd had. I explained the truth. She left me with a note and no explanation, and the property wasn't even in her name. Unlike Vicky, Jack was a man of his word. He called back 3 hours later. He spoke with her directly and showed her the text with a photo of her note. She finally admitted what really happened. Jack and his wife didn't support how she handled this. This wasn't how we raised her, their words. He exhaled heavily and explained she'd always had her mother's approach to finances. Secretive, always maintaining separate accounts, keeping options open. He should have warned me years ago when he saw her insisting on separate bank accounts even after marriage. His wife pulled similar stunts early in their marriage until he discovered her secret credit cards and threatened divorce if it continued. The parallel explains so much about Vicky's behavior. She'd learned financial deception at home. And when Jack asked about my plans going forward, I told him honestly I was still figuring that out. But I definitely wasn't selling the ranch. This place was supposed to be our forever home, and I still wanted that for myself. Don't blame you one bit, Jack replied. Between us, he thought I was getting the better end of this deal. That new fellow she'd taken up with, Jason something, came by to pick her up yesterday. Drove some leased European sports car he probably couldn't afford, wore more jewelry than Jack's wife. His old man's intuition said this guy wasn't in it for the long haul. After we hung up, curiosity got me checking social media, something I normally avoided. Stacy's Instagram was filled with thinly veiled references to the situation. Photos of her and Vicky at expensive restaurants with captions like upgrading her life and men never know what they had until it's gone. The audacity was stunning, coming from a 38-year-old woman who'd burned through 2 marriages and was rumored to be dating her married boss. Comments from their circle ranged from "Preach girl," "Yow to his loss," to "Living your best life now." Made me wonder if any of them knew the real story, or if they were all operating on Vicky's victim narrative. I disabled all my social accounts that night and sat on the porch swing with Tucker. He'd been unusually clingy since Vicky left, despite her constantly complaining about his shedding and banishing him to the mudroom whenever her sophisticated friends visited. Dogs have better instincts about people than we give them credit for, yet they love unconditionally anyway. He rested his head on my knee and gazed up with those loyal brown eyes. At least someone in this house had genuine emotions. 3 weeks after finding the note, I was rebuilding the fence in the south pasture when Vicky's car came flying up the driveway, kicking up gravel and dust. She'd finally figured out that the ranch wasn't in her name. I didn't even put down my tools, just kept hammering posts while she stormed across the field toward me. She looked different. Blonde hair freshly highlighted, designer jeans tucked into expensive boots that had definitely never seen actual farm work, chunky jewelry that probably cost more than our monthly mortgage, playing the part of the sophisticated city girl who'd outgrown her country husband. "We need to talk about the ranch," she demanded, not even bothering with hello. I just kept working. "Did you hear me? I said we need to discuss selling this place. My lawyer says we need to list immediately." I finally looked up. "Nothing to discuss. It's not for sale." Her perfectly made-up face twisted in confusion. "What do you mean it's not for sale? We have to divide our assets." I didn't respond, just pulled another fence post from my truck bed. "Ryan, stop being difficult. We both know we need to sell and split the money. I've already talked to my broker about listing it." I stayed silent for another minute while she got increasingly nervous. Finally, I said, "You should probably check the property records before making plans." Her eyes narrowed. "What are you talking about?" Ranch isn't in your name. Never was. You made sure of that when we bought it." The confusion on her face was almost comical. "That's not possible. We bought it together." I shrugged. "Deed says different. So does the mortgage. Check for yourself." Her face went through a series of expressions. Disbelief, confusion, then dawning horror as she realized I was telling the truth. "But we both paid for the down payment." "Yep, and you arranged all the paperwork. Made sure everything was in my name only. Guess you outplayed yourself." That's when the conversation shifted. Suddenly she was all sweet and reasonable, asking if we could talk about this like adults. She followed me around the pasture like a lost puppy as I continued working. When that didn't work, she switched to guilt. Didn't I remember how we found this place together? How she helped design the layout? How she'd supported my career? I finally stopped and faced her. "You mean like how you supported me by stealing $22,000 from our joint account? Or by secretly buying a lakefront cabin while I was eating ramen to save for our renovations?" Her eyes widened with that deer in headlights look. "Busted!" She tried to claim the cabin was an investment property she was going to surprise me with, once it appreciated enough. Yeah, right. Asked her if that's why she hid all the paperwork and claimed the withdrawals from our joint account were an investment? Her eyes snapped back to mine. "You've been checking up on me?" Like I was the one who did something wrong. "Wouldn't have had to if you hadn't been stealing from me." She flinched at the word stealing and tried claiming that money was partially hers. I reminded her that her paycheck went into her personal account while only my income went into the joint account. So no, actually, it wasn't hers at all. The truth was dawning on her face. I knew everything. She tried another approach, saying Jason, her new soulmate, was going to help with cabin repairs, but his company was having cash flow issues. She was counting on her portion from selling the ranch to fix everything. She was in a tight spot. "Not my problem," I said simply. "Maybe your soulmate isn't as financially stable as you thought." Her face hardened. "You're enjoying this, aren't you? Being difficult just to punish me?" "Nope. Just following the legal documents you arranged. Funny how that worked out." She tried everything after that. Said I was being vindictive, brought up how she found this place, and designed the kitchen renovation. She even had the nerve to say she deserved compensation for putting up with living so far from the city. But our bank statements showed I paid for 80% of everything while she was secretly stashing cash. "What you didn't plan for," I told her finally, "was leaving before land values here peaked. If you'd waited another year, this place would be worth $150,000 more. Shitty timing on your part." Her face showed the truth of my words. She'd miscalculated, thought the ranch would be an easy payday in the divorce. Finding out it was solely in my name had thrown her entire plan off. She threatened weakly to get a lawyer. I informed her I already had one. She stormed back to her car, turning back once to shout, "This isn't over!" Or before peeling out down the driveway, sending dust flying. After she left, I changed all the locks and codes immediately, called Dan with an update, and started planning my next moves carefully. The thing about working livestock auctions is you learn to read people. Know when they're bluffing about a bid, when they're desperate to sell, when they're trying to drive up the price artificially. Vicky thought she was being clever, but she was broadcasting her desperation like a neon sign. Dan advised not responding to anything without running it by him first. She'd try to get me to agree to things in writing, make verbal agreements over the phone, but I shouldn't fall for it. I went through our entire house that weekend, documenting everything of value: furniture, appliances, electronics, tools, took photos, found receipts where I could, anything to establish what was mine before she could try to claim it. He found some interesting things in the process. A hidden shoebox in the back of our closet with jewelry I'd never seen before. A stack of credit card statements in her name, with charges at hotels I'd never been to. The evidence of her double life was everywhere once I started looking. The texts slowed down, then stopped completely when she realized I wasn't responding. Her dad called again to apologize and let me know they weren't giving her money. She made her bed, he said, sounding tired. Her mother's the same way, thinks she can always find an easy fix for her problems. Never works out that way. Through mutual friends, I found out her soulmate Jason was this flashy developer who just finalized his own divorce. Guy was leveraged to the eyeballs on several failing projects, started building luxury condos right before the market softened. Their relationship apparently hit the rocks when he realized she wouldn't be bringing any ranch sale money to help fund his next sure thing investment. 2 weeks after she left, I got formal divorce papers. Interestingly, no claim on the ranch, just requesting division of other assets and $3,200 monthly in spousal support due to her significantly lower income. My lawyer laughed at that one. We had records showing she made almost as much as me, but hidden most of it. While sorting through old files in our home office, I found something interesting. Her loan application for the cabin listed an income 40% higher than what she reported on our taxes. Tax fraud is no joke. I kept that info in my back pocket, just in case. Dan suggested we use it as leverage if needed, but otherwise hold off. Sometimes the best revenge is just letting someone self-destruct, he said. From what you're telling me, she and this developer boyfriend are headed that way with or without your help. Instead of fighting over small stuff, I agreed to let her have the furniture she wanted and even our newer SUV. Dan thought I was being too generous, but I was playing the long game. I wanted the divorce finalized quickly, with minimal drama. Fighting over couches and cars would just drag things out. My brother Mike wasn't convinced when I told him my strategy. Felt like I was letting her win. I explained I was keeping what mattered. The ranch, my retirement accounts, my tools and equipment. She could have the IKEA furniture and the car with 60,000 miles on it. I'd come out ahead in the end. I kept working, kept taking care of the ranch, kept my head down, let her think I was just rolling over on the small stuff because I was hurt or trying to take the high road. Meanwhile, I was documenting everything I found about her financial situation. The hidden income, the tax discrepancies, the money she'd siphoned from our joint account. During this time, I also learned more about Jason through industry connections. His company had overextended on 3 different developments. Banks were calling in loans. Contractors were filing liens for unpaid work. The guy was a house of cards waiting to collapse. And Vicky had hitched her wagon to his star right as it was burning out. And I also knew from her social media that things between them were rocky. She'd stopped posting those living my best life photos, and Stacy's comments had changed from, "You deserve happiness, babe," to vague supportive stuff like, "Hang in there, better days ahead." The fantasy was crumbling faster than she'd expected. 4 months later, the divorce was nearly final. I kept the ranch and started making changes. Converted her home office into a workshop where I could restore vintage motorcycle parts. My side business was finally taking off now that I had time to focus on it. The ranch was starting to feel like mine again. I repainted the living room a dark green that she'd always hated. Bought a leather couch to replace the uncomfortable modern one she'd insisted on. Let Tucker sleep on the bed. Small changes that made the place feel less like a museum and more like a home. My brother kept trying to set me up with his wife's friends, but I wasn't ready. Instead, I focused on my job as the regional livestock auction manager, rebuilding my savings, and reconnecting with buddies I'd neglected during my marriage. Joined this local classic vehicle restoration club that got me out of the house on weekends. I ran into Stacy at the grocery store about 5 months after Vicky left. She looked surprised to see me, then uncomfortable. I casually asked how Vicky was doing, like I was inquiring about any old acquaintance. Stacy lied badly, saying she was good, really good, loving her new life. I smiled in a way that made her squirm and asked how Jason's development company was doing, mentioning the issues with his River Heights project. Her eyes widened slightly. I wouldn't know about that. No. Huh. Just figured since you guys all hang out together, you'd have heard. Those contractors filing liens for unpaid work. The bank threatening to foreclose. Messy stuff. She mumbled something about being late for an appointment and practically ran to the checkout. I knew the information would get back to Vicky within the hour. Let her wonder how much I knew. I also knew from checking public records that the cabin she bought had serious structural issues. The property tax assessment had been reduced by 30% due to significant foundation defects requiring major repairs. Estimates for fixing that kind of damage usually start around $60,000. Money she definitely didn't have if she was asking for spousal support. Her dad called occasionally to check in on me. We still had that connection through our shared love of classic trucks. During one of these calls, he mentioned that Vicky had asked to move back home temporarily, but her mother had refused. Margaret said she made her choice, and it would just enable her if they let her come running home every time life got hard. 8 months after she left, everything fell into place better than I could have planned. Jason's development company filed for bankruptcy protection. The news was all over the local business journal. The cabin she bought had been officially condemned by the county due to the foundation issues, making it essentially worthless. And most beautiful of all, the IRS sent her a notice of audit for the past 3 years. Funny how anonymous tips work sometimes. I was at the grocery store picking up stuff for the week when I literally ran into her coming around the end of an aisle. Her cart hit mine with a metallic clang. She looked rough, not as put together as usual. Nothing like the polished woman who'd shown up at the ranch months ago. After awkward greetings, she asked if we could talk somewhere. Against my better judgment, I agreed. We ended up sitting in my truck in the parking lot, her fidgeting with the strap of her purse. "I've made some bad decisions," she admitted, voice shaking. "No, shut," I replied calmly. She broke down then, telling me everything. How Jason had convinced her to invest $30,000 in his latest project, money she'd partly gotten from selling jewelry I'd bought her over the years. How the cabin was essentially worthless now, and how the IRS was breathing down her neck for discrepancies in her reported income. "I don't know what to do, Ryan. I'm drowning here." Tears were smudging her mascara. I just sat there, letting the silence fill the cab of my truck. Part of me felt satisfaction seeing her like this, karma coming full circle. But another part, the part that had loved her for 8 years, felt hollow. This wasn't a victory, just a sad ending to what I'd thought was a good story. Finally, she whispered, asking if I could help her. Maybe let her move into the guest room at the ranch for a few weeks until she got back on her feet. "Interesting," I said. "So you leave me with a note, try to take half my property, and now you want my help?" She claimed she was desperate. Her parents wouldn't even talk to her anymore. Jason and she broke up weeks ago. Stacy's ghosting her since she can't afford to go out anymore. I was the only person who might understand. Understand what? Being lied to? Having money stolen from me? Finding out my marriage was basically a long con? It wasn't like that, she protested weakly. At least not at first. I really did love you. Just not enough to be honest with me. I pulled out a folder I happened to have in my truck and handed it to her. Inside was every document I'd collected. The bank transfers, tax discrepancies, loan applications with different income amounts. And her face went white when she realized I was the one who triggered the IRS audit. She begged me not to send anything else, saying she'd lose everything, her license, possibly face charges. Should have thought about that before taking $22,000 from our account. "What do you want?" she asked, defeated. "Nothing. That's the beauty of it. I've already won. Keep the SUV. I don't care. But if you ever try to come after me or the ranch again, the rest of this goes to the IRS, your broker, and anyone else who might be interested." She admitted she was stupid for throwing away a good life for nothing. She let Stacy convince her she was missing out on life, that she deserved more exciting things, a more glamorous lifestyle. Turns out boring and stable beats exciting and broke any day. And it only cost you your marriage, career, and reputation to figure that out. Bargain. She winced at my sarcasm, but didn't argue. When she asked if I thought I'd ever forgive her, I thought about it honestly. "Don't know, but it doesn't really matter if I do or don't. We're done either way." She tried asking if I was seeing anyone. I told her it wasn't her business, but no, I was taking time for myself. "Smart," she nodded. "I should have done that after Brad." Brad was her ex before me. They'd broken up just 2 months before we met. I'd always suspected I was the rebound guy, but it hadn't seemed important back then. "For what it's worth," she added, "the ranch looks good. I drove by last week. The new fence in the south pasture. It's nice." "Didn't do it for your approval," I replied. "Did it because it needed doing." The final divorce papers were signed the next week. No alimony, no claims on anything of mine. Her lawyer looked relieved to be done with the whole thing. Last I heard, she had to sell her cabin at a massive loss, lost her real estate license temporarily due to the tax issues, and moved back in with her parents at 29. Her dad confirmed it when we met up to work on his truck the following month. "She's humbled," he told me, handing me a wrench. "Never thought I'd see the day." "People change when they have to," I said. The truth was, I was better. The ranch was thriving. I'd added 3 horses to board for extra income. My motorcycle restoration business had taken off enough that I was considering cutting back my auction hours. The ranch is peaceful now, no drama, just me, Tucker, and the horses, and occasionally inviting friends for dinner. It's not the life I thought I'd have, but it's a good one. Turns out sometimes the worst things that happen to you lead to the best places you can go. And sometimes the trash does really take itself out. Story 2. This story is titled, Not Tonight or Any Night. My wife declared, so I redirected my time, attention, and resources. A couple of days later, she is asking for forgiveness, but I am done. Hey everyone! Before we jump into today's video, I need your help. We've noticed the channel is losing some traction, and subscribing is one of the best ways you can support us. It's quick, free, and it helps us keep bringing you awesome content. Your support means the world. Let's keep this channel growing together. Thanks so much. Now let's start the video. I, 34 male, still remember the exact moment when those words left Jessica's, 32 female lips. Not tonight or any night. The finality in her voice made my body go cold. We'd been married for 6 years. And yeah, things hadn't been perfect lately, but I never expected something so final about our intimate life. Some background about me. I'm a marketing manager at a mid-sized tech company in the Midwest. Nothing fancy, but it pays the bills, and I've been steadily climbing the ladder. Been there about 8 years now. I met Jessica in college during our junior year. She was studying psychology, I was in business. We clicked right away. Both of us were ambitious but down to earth. Dated for 3 years before getting married in a modest ceremony with about 80 guests, mostly family and close friends. Jessica worked as an HR consultant and made decent money. We bought a 3-bedroom house in a nice suburb about 4 years ago. No kids yet. We were both focused on our careers first. I always thought we had a good thing going. We both contributed to the household, took vacations twice a year, usually one beach trip and one visiting family, had a decent social circle of other couples our age. Pretty normal life, you know? Nothing extraordinary, but stable and comfortable. At least that's what I thought. That evening started like any other normal day. I came home from work tired after a 10-hour day dealing with client bullshit and a presentation that didn't go as well as I hoped. I was looking forward to seeing Jessica, maybe ordering some takeout, watching a movie, the usual stuff couples do. The moment I walked in, I could tell something was off. She was sitting at the kitchen island, scrolling through her phone with this weird intensity. We had dinner while talking about boring stuff. Her coworkers' drama, my project deadline, the usual crap. Then, we moved to the living room where she continued scrolling through her phone, probably on one of those feminist Instagram accounts she'd been obsessed with lately, while I watched some random show on TV. When I leaned over to kiss her neck, something that used to make her smile, she pulled away sharp like I'd tried to stab her or something. Don't, she said, not even looking up from her damn screen. I'm not in the mood. You haven't been in the mood for weeks now, I replied, trying hard not to sound frustrated even though I totally was. Is everything okay? That's when she put down her phone, looked me straight in the eyes with this cold expression I'd never seen before, and delivered those crushing words. Not tonight or any night. I'm done with that part of our relationship. My mind raced through a million possible responses, but I just sat there like an idiot, my mouth probably hanging open. How do you even reply to someone suddenly ending physical intimacy in a marriage? No explanation. No room for discussion. Just a one-sided decision that affected us both. What exactly do you mean? I finally managed to ask, hoping I misunderstood. Exactly what I said, she continued, her voice weirdly calm like she was explaining something to a child. I'm comfortable with our life together. The house, our social circle, the stability, but I'm no longer interested in physical intimacy with you or any man. I've been reading a lot about how women are conditioned to provide physical affection to men, and I've decided I'm not participating in that patriarchal expectation anymore. You can accept it or not. That's your choice. Holy shit. She'd been getting deeper into that radical feminist stuff online recently, but I never thought it would affect our relationship. I was completely blindsided. So you're just unilaterally deciding that our marriage doesn't include physical intimacy anymore? Without any discussion? I asked, trying to understand. I don't need your permission to set boundaries with my own body, she replied, her tone getting that edge I'd come to recognize whenever she was quoting something from her online groups. The fact that you think this requires a discussion just shows how entitled men are to women's bodies. I sat back, completely stunned. Jessica, this isn't about entitlement. This is about our relationship, about connection and intimacy between partners who supposedly love each other. Love doesn't mean I have to perform physical acts I no longer want to participate in, she countered. When did this change? When did you stop wanting to be with me that way? I asked, genuinely confused. Just 2 months ago, things had seemed normal. She shrugged. It's been building for a while. I've just finally found the courage to vocalize it instead of performing for your benefit. That night, I slept on the couch. Not because she asked me to, but because I couldn't bear to lie next to someone who had just shattered my understanding of our entire relationship. The next few days were weird as hell. We continued living together, eating together, even watching TV together, all while this invisible wall had been built between us. She acted like her declaration was as ordinary as announcing she wanted to change grocery stores or something, not the complete reshaping of our marriage. I tried bringing up counseling over breakfast 3 days after her announcement. I found a couples therapist with good reviews. I think we should talk to someone about what's going on between us. We don't need therapy, she responded dismissively while rolling her eyes. There's nothing wrong with me, and I'm not going to be pressured into physical intimacy I don't want just because society expects it. Maybe you should get therapy for your dependency on female validation. Jesus Christ. Of course she was right about not being pressured. I would never do that. But her complete unwillingness to even talk about this sudden change left me feeling like I was living with a stranger wearing my wife's face. Everything I said was twisted to make me sound like some kind of oppressor. At night, laying on my side of our now purely functional bed, I'd moved back from the couch, determined not to be displaced in my own home. I'd stare at the ceiling, wondering how I missed the gradual breakdown of our connection. Had I been so absorbed in work that I failed to notice her pulling away? Or had she hidden her feelings until reaching some breaking point I never saw coming? I reviewed our recent history, looking for signs. Sure, our sex life had slowed down somewhat over the past year, but that seemed normal for a couple married 6+ years, both working demanding jobs. We still had date nights, still held hands during movies, still told each other, I love you before bed. Or at least we had until recently. One thing became real clear real fast. I was now in a marriage where I was neither wanted nor needed in any meaningful way. I was simply convenient, a contributor to bills, a social partner for couple-oriented gatherings, a housemate who helped maintain our outward image of marital success. Just another evil man she could point to when talking to her new friends about how she was setting boundaries. I tried one more time to understand, catching her on a Saturday morning when we were both home. Jessica, I'm trying to respect your feelings, but I need to understand better what's happening. Did I do something wrong? Is there something I can change? She sighed dramatically, like my question was the most exhausting thing she'd ever heard. This is exactly the problem with men. You think everything is about you. This is about my journey and my autonomy. The fact that you're making it about what you did wrong just proves my point. But we're married, I said, frustration building. Your decisions affect me too. So what? You think your entitlement to my body outweighs my right to control it? This is why the patriarchy persists. Because men like you can't handle women making their own choices. I walked away from that conversation feeling completely hopeless. There was no reasoning with her, no finding common ground. She had created a narrative where any disagreement with her position just confirmed her worldview about oppressive men. 2 weeks after her declaration, I found myself sitting in my car outside our house, unable to summon the energy to go inside. What was waiting for me there? Another evening of polite coexistence with someone who had unilaterally changed the terms of our relationship without any real explanation? Another lecture about how I was part of the problem for expecting basic human connection in a marriage? That's when I realized I had a choice to make. I could continue living in this emotional desert, hoping for rain that would never come, or I could redirect my time, attention, and resources towards something or someone that offered at least the possibility of growth. As I finally walked through our front door, a plan was forming in my mind. Not revenge or some dramatic confrontation, at least not yet, but something more powerful, a complete redirection of my life's energy. If she had moved on from me without physically leaving, maybe I could do the same. My redirection began with small changes. I set my alarm for 5:30 a.m., a full hour before she would wake up. Those quiet morning hours quickly became sacred to me, time that was completely my own, free from her judgmental stares and passive-aggressive comments. I started with 20 minutes of meditation, something I'd always dismissed as impractical with my busy schedule. To my surprise, that brief period of morning stillness helped clear my mind of the constant thoughts about my failing marriage. Next came physical exercise. Nothing dramatic at first, just basic push-ups, sit-ups, and a short run around the neighborhood. By the time she emerged from our bedroom, I had already showered, dressed, and started my day with purpose. "You're up early," she commented on the third day, finding me sipping coffee and reading at the kitchen table. The slight annoyance in her voice was obvious, She was used to me being half asleep while she dominated the morning space. Just making some changes, I replied casually, not offering any further explanation. She didn't ask for one, just made some comment under her breath about toxic masculinity and exercise culture that I pretended not to hear. The second week, I joined a gym near my office. Instead of rushing home after work to an increasingly uncomfortable environment, I spent an hour working out. The physical exertion became a form of therapy. Each rep pushed out another fragment of resentment and self-pity. I started fantasizing about the future, one where Jessica wasn't the center of my universe. I also reconnected with old friends I'd neglected during my marriage. Guys Jessica had always disliked for being too masculine or problematic. Nothing dramatic, just casual lunches and after-work drinks with soda or coffee. I was careful not to mention my marital situation. These meetings weren't about seeking sympathy or bad-mouthing my wife. They were about rebuilding connections that had nothing to do with my identity as a husband to an increasingly hostile woman. What was really interesting was realizing how many other guys were going through similar shit. Not identical, but the same pattern. Wives or girlfriends who had gradually transformed into critical strangers, constantly finding fault with normal male behavior while expecting the financial benefits and emotional support to continue unchanged. My buddy Chris, 36 million, was dealing with a girlfriend who had suddenly decided that his video gaming hobby was problematic, despite having dated him for 3 years, knowing it was his main way to decompress. My college friend Mark, 35 million, couldn't post anything on social media without his wife publicly commenting to correct his thinking on various social issues. It's like they want us to be both mind readers and punching bags, Chris said during one of our lunch meetups. You can't win. That phrase stuck with me. You can't win. Not if you keep playing by constantly changing rules you had no say in creating. So maybe the answer was to stop playing altogether and create my own game. I started setting aside money in a separate account Jessica couldn't access. Nothing dramatic that would affect our household contributions. Just redirecting my discretionary spending and slowly building a safety net. If nothing else, it gave me a sense of control in a situation where I felt increasingly powerless. 1 month into my redirection, I caught my reflection in the mirror and barely recognized myself. The daily workouts had started reshaping my body, shoulders broader, stomach flatter. My posture had improved, and the constant tension that had knotted my shoulders for months had eased. But the most significant change was in my eyes. They looked focused, alive in a way they hadn't been since her declaration. I updated my wardrobe next. Nothing flashy or desperate, just well-fitted clothes that suited my improving physique and projected confidence. When I wore a new shirt to dinner with friends, several people commented on how good I looked. You've lost weight, haven't you? Our friend Melissa asked during a dinner party. Just been taking better care of myself, I replied, with a smile. Jessica noticed too, though she tried to disguise her interest with criticism. Isn't that shirt a little tight? She asked one morning as I was getting ready for work. Seems like you're trying way too hard. Very midlife crisis energy. I just smiled and left without responding, which seemed to annoy her even more. The redirection extended to my finances as well. We always maintained separate accounts alongside our joint one for household expenses. I continued contributing my share to our joint obligations, but redirected my discretionary spending. The expensive trip to a women-only retreat in Costa Rica that Jessica had been hinting about for our anniversary. That money went instead into a high-yield investment account under only my name. I also invested in a photography workshop, a passion I had abandoned years ago after Jessica complained about the time it took away from us. Ironic now, considering her stance. Photography got me outdoors on weekends, hiking to capture landscapes at dawn, when the light was perfect. These solo excursions became another form of meditation. Behind the camera, framing each shot, I found a state of flow that allowed me to forget everything else. I invested in decent equipment, nothing outrageous, but a good DSLR camera and a couple of quality lenses. My first few attempts were pretty amateur, but I watched tutorials online and practiced constantly. Soon I was capturing images I was genuinely proud of. Mountain landscapes bathed in early morning light, close-ups of frost patterns on fallen leaves, dramatic storm clouds gathering over fields. I started posting my work online, connecting with other photographers and building a small following that appreciated my eye for composition. Some of my photos even started selling as prints through an online marketplace, creating a small but growing side income that went straight into my separate account. Where have you been going so early on Saturdays? She asked after several weeks of my new routine, the entitlement in her voice crystal clear. She was used to me being available whenever she wanted. Taking photographs? I answered simply. Since when are you into photography? The accusatory tone, like I needed her permission to have hobbies. I've always been into it. I just haven't had the time to pursue it until now. Her expression suggested she wanted to ask more, but couldn't quite figure out how, or perhaps didn't want to show too much interest in my life after having so deliberately stepped back from it. Well, I needed help with some things around the house last weekend, but you were nowhere to be found, she complained. Typical, no interest in my activities, just how they inconvenienced her. You could have texted, I replied calmly. Phone works even in the mountains. I shouldn't have to text my own husband to get basic help, she snapped. I just shrugged. Things change. Those two words hung in the air between us, and I saw something flicker across her face. The first hint that she was beginning to realize her declaration might have consequences she hadn't anticipated. At work, my renewed focus paid off big time. I approached projects with clarity and confidence that hadn't been there during the months of marital distress. My boss, Rob, 45 male, noticed the change. Whatever you're doing, keep it up, he said, after I successfully landed a major client that had been on the fence for months. You're on fire lately. The compliment meant more than it should have. After months of feeling unwanted at home, professional recognition filled some of the void. Not completely, but enough to keep moving forward. I volunteered for projects that required travel, something I'd avoided in the past to spend more time with Jessica. A 3-day conference in Chicago, a week-long training in Denver, a client meeting in Boston. Each trip was a breath of fresh air. Hotel rooms where I could spread out without judgment, meals where no one made snide comments about my choices, conversations with people who didn't view every interaction through an ideological lens. During my Denver trip, I met up with an old college friend, Tom, who had moved there years ago. We hiked in the mountains, and I took some of my best photos yet. When I posted them online, my follower count jumped significantly, and I sold 3 prints within a week. Online, my follower count jumped significantly, and I sold 3 prints within a week. You know, you could actually turn this into a serious side business, Tom said, as we rested at a scenic overlook. Your eye for composition is really good. His casual encouragement planted a seed in my mind. What if photography wasn't just an escape? What if it could be something more substantial? A potential path to a different future? 3 months into my redirection, I was sleeping better, looking better, and performing better in nearly every aspect of my life except my marriage, which remained this empty shell of formal interactions and parallel existences. The irony wasn't lost on me. In withdrawing her affection, Jessica had inadvertently pushed me toward becoming a stronger version of myself. It was like the universe's weird way of compensating. What Jessica didn't know was that I'd opened a separate checking account and started routing 50% of my paychecks there, including my performance bonuses. The other 50% was more than enough to cover my share of our joint expenses. I was building my escape fund dollar by dollar. Not that I was planning to leave yet. I wanted to see how this played out first. One evening, as I prepared to leave for a photography meetup, she asked an unexpected question. Are you seeing someone else? The entitlement in her voice was unbelievable. She could end our physical relationship unilaterally, but still expected exclusive access to my time and attention. I paused by the door, camera bag over my shoulder. No, I answered truthfully. Why would you ask that? You've changed, she said, her voice carrying a note I couldn't identify. You're hardly ever home anymore. The hypocrisy of her concern almost made me laugh. I'm just redirecting my time and energy into things that fulfill me, I replied, using her own clinical approach. Isn't that what you've been doing? That's different, she responded, clearly irritated that I'd used her own logic against her. I made a personal choice about my body and autonomy. And I'm making personal choices about my time and interests, I countered. Seems perfectly fair to me. So you're what, punishing me? She asked, her voice rising slightly. Not at all, I replied calmly. I'm adapting to our new reality. You set a boundary, and I respect that. I'm simply setting boundaries of my own. She had no response to that, and I left without waiting for one. As I drove to meet my photography friends, I realized something fundamental had shifted. For the first time since her declaration, I wasn't desperately hoping for her to change her mind. I was too busy creating a life that no longer centered around her approval or affection. I met my photography group at a local park where we were practicing night photography techniques. Among them was a guy named David, who worked for a local magazine. These are really good, he said, looking through some of my recent shots on my camera's display. We're always looking for local talent for our nature section. Would you be interested in submitting some work? Just like that, another door opened. By the time I got home that night, Jessica was already in bed, probably annoyed that I hadn't been there to listen to her latest complaints about her co-workers or patriarchal oppression. I didn't care. I had bigger things on my mind. The pivotal moment came during a company retreat 6 months into my redirection. My team had gathered at this lakeside resort for a weekend of strategic planning and team building. After a productive day of meetings, we relaxed around a fire pit, sharing stories and snacks under the stars. My colleague Emma, 29 female, who had joined the marketing department 3 months earlier, sat down beside me. Emma was pretty much Jessica's opposite, warm, supportive, and actually interested in other people's lives. You know, when I first started, everyone told me how lucky I was to be working with you, she said, her voice quiet enough that only I could hear. Really? Why is that? I asked, genuinely curious. They said you'd completely transformed the department's performance, but they also mentioned how much you've changed personally over the past few months. She hesitated, then added, They said you used to be withdrawn, almost sad. That doesn't match the person I've known. I stared into the flames, considering how to respond. Let's just say I went through some personal challenges and decided to focus on what I could control, rather than what I couldn't. She nodded thoughtfully. Well, whatever you did worked. You seem completely in your element now. As our conversation continued into the evening, I found myself relaxing in a way I hadn't with anyone in a long time. Emma was intelligent and insightful, with a sharp sense of humor that repeatedly caught me off guard. We discovered shared interests in photography and hiking, and she seemed genuinely impressed when I showed her some of my recent work on my phone. These are amazing, she said, leaning closer to swipe through the gallery. You have a real talent. Have you considered showing these professionally? Actually, I just started selling some prints online, and a local magazine might feature a few, I replied, surprised at how good it felt to share this part of my life with someone who genuinely seemed to care. That's fantastic. I'd love to see more of your work sometime, she said, smiling in a way that made me acutely aware of how long it had been since someone had looked at me with genuine admiration instead of criticism. The warmth of her shoulder against mine sent an unexpected jolt through my system, a stark reminder of how long it had been since I'd experienced even casual physical contact. I carefully shifted away, uncomfortable with my reaction. Despite the situation with Jessica, I wasn't going to be that guy who starts something new before ending the old. Later, as the group dispersed to their cabins, Emma walked alongside me on the path. Some of us are planning a sunrise hike tomorrow before the meetings start, she mentioned. You should join. Perfect lighting for those landscape shots you love. I agreed, and the next morning found myself standing atop a ridge with Emma and two other colleagues as the sun painted the sky in brilliant oranges and pinks. I took dozens of photographs, but found my lens repeatedly drawn to Emma's profile against the dramatic backdrop. Emma represented everything I'd been missing: genuine interest, mutual respect, actual conversation rather than lectures. But I knew I needed to resolve my situation with Jessica before even considering anything else. When I returned home Sunday evening, Jessica was in the kitchen preparing dinner, something she hadn't done for us in months. The timing was suspicious as hell. How was the retreat? She asked, her tone unusually attentive. Productive, I replied, setting down my bag. We finalized the strategic plan for next quarter. She nodded, then asked, I saw some of the photos you posted. Beautiful location. It was, I agreed, wondering at her sudden interest. That woman in some of the pictures, is she on your team? The question caught me off guard. I hadn't realized Emma had featured prominently in my uploads. That's Emma, our new marketing specialist, I answered neutrally. She's very pretty, Jessica observed, her eyes studying my face. The territorial behavior was rich coming from someone who had explicitly rejected me. I hadn't really noticed, I lied, feeling oddly defensive. Really? You've taken about a dozen photos with her in them. Seems like you noticed plenty. The accusatory tone was unmistakable. I chose my next words carefully. She happened to be in the frame during our group activities. Why are you asking about this? You made it very clear that certain aspects of our relationship are over. You don't get to dictate who I spend time with professionally. She turned back to the stove, clearly annoyed that I wasn't apologizing or explaining myself further. Just curious about your colleagues, that's all. I have a right to know who my husband spends time with. That was the moment I decided to accelerate my exit plan. The one-sided nature of her expectations had become unbearable. The following week brought more surprises. Jessica started initiating conversations, asking about my day, even suggesting we watch shows together. She made dinner several times and didn't even pepper the conversation with her usual ideological commentary. It was like living with a completely different person, or rather, with the person I'd married years ago, before she'd transformed into a stranger. I knew exactly what was happening. She was trying to re-establish control, to pull me back into orbit now that she sensed I was drifting away. The realization strengthened my resolve. This wasn't about revenge. It was about self-preservation. Two key events aligned to create the perfect opportunity for my freedom. First, I received a significant promotion at work, with a substantial raise and more travel opportunities. I kept this information to myself, not sharing it with Jessica, despite her increasingly desperate attempts to engage with me. Second, through my professional network, I learned that Jessica's company was planning major layoffs due to a merger. Her department was likely to be hit hard. This wasn't inside trading or anything illegal, just the kind of information that flows through business connections in our mid-sized city. The timing couldn't have been better. Over the past months, through my networking and new social connections, I'd learned that Jessica's company was planning these layoffs. In fact, I'd helped a colleague's spouse get hired at a competing firm 3 weeks earlier, knowing they'd need someone with Jessica's exact qualifications. I could have easily done the same for Jessica. A single phone call would have secured her an interview at minimum, but I chose not to. Instead, I accelerated my exit strategy. I consulted with a lawyer, discreetly, paying in cash from my separate account. I learned exactly what I needed to do to protect myself financially in a divorce. I documented Jessica's declaration about ending physical intimacy, her subsequent behavior, everything that might help my case. I also discovered through casual conversations that Jessica had been bad-mouthing me to her friends and family, painting herself as some kind of victim of the patriarchy while conveniently omitting her unilateral decision to fundamentally change our marriage. This sealed the deal. My escape needed to be complete and decisive. 2 weeks later, Jessica's company announced the layoffs. She came home visibly shaken. "My department might be cut next month," she said, clearly expecting sympathy. "I'm really worried." "That's tough," I responded, offering basic courtesy but nothing more. "I'm sure you'll figure it out." The layoffs happened faster than expected. The following Friday, Jessica came home in tears. "I lost my job," she sobbed. "They eliminated our entire department." "I'm sorry to hear that," I said, maintaining a neutral expression. "What's your plan?" She looked shocked at my response. "My plan? I just lost my job. I need time to process this." "Of course," I replied. "Take all the time you need, but our financial obligations don't stop, so just let me know how you plan to continue contributing to the household expenses." Her jaw literally dropped. "Are you serious right now? I'm in crisis and you're asking about bills?" I shrugged. "Just being practical. We both contribute equally, right? That's always been your position." The next morning, I made my move. While Jessica was in the shower, I transferred every penny from our joint account into my private account, leaving just enough to avoid overdraft fees. Then I packed a bag with essentials and my most important possessions. When she emerged from the bathroom, I was waiting in the living room with divorce papers. "What's this?" she asked, eyeing the documents. "Divorce papers," I replied calmly. "I've realized I deserve better than a one-sided marriage with someone who unilaterally changed the terms of our relationship without discussion or compromise." Her face went through a series of emotions: shock, anger, disbelief. "You can't be serious. Because I wouldn't sleep with you? That's what this is about?" "No, it's about respect and reciprocity. You made a choice that affected us both, presented it as non-negotiable, and expected me to simply accept it. That's not a partnership," she scoffed. "So you're running off with your little work girlfriend? How predictable. This has nothing to do with Emma or anyone else. This is about you and me and the broken agreement between us. By the way, I've moved our joint funds into a separate account that you won't have access to until we reach a settlement." Her face paled. "You did what? You can't do that. I just lost my job. How am I supposed to pay for anything?" "Not my problem," I replied, echoing the same dismissive tone she'd used when ending our physical relationship. "You should have considered the potential consequences before making unilateral decisions about our marriage." "This is financial abuse," she shouted, tears forming in her eyes. "I need that money for basic necessities." "No, this is consequences. And speaking of necessities, the mortgage is due next week. I've calculated your half. It's listed in the documents. I'll expect your payment on time." She started to panic visibly. "Please, you can't do this. I have no income right now. I need time to find a new job. You should have thought about that before declaring not tonight or any night and treating me like an accessory to your life rather than a partner. You wanted independence from patriarchal expectations? Congratulations, you've got it. Complete financial independence too." Over the next week, Jessica's behavior changed dramatically. The feminist rhetoric disappeared, replaced by desperate pleas and attempts to renegotiate. She suggested counseling, hinted at reconsidering her stance on intimacy, even tried seduction one night, which I firmly rejected. My lawyer had advised me not to leave the house yet, so we continued living together in increasingly tense circumstances. Jessica's friends started calling me, telling me how cruel I was being, how I needed to support my wife in her time of need. I blocked their numbers one by one. Her parents reached out next, suggesting we all meet to discuss the situation. I declined politely but firmly. Your daughter made her choice months ago, I told her father over the phone. I'm simply making mine now. 2 weeks into this standoff, Jessica's desperation peaked. She had no job prospects, no access to our joint savings, and bills piling up. She approached me one evening, completely defeated. Please, she begged, tears streaming down her face. I need help. I can't do this alone. That's an interesting perspective, I replied coolly. Wasn't it you who told me that women don't need men? That marriage is just a patriarchal construct? That physical intimacy with me was something you could unilaterally end without discussion? I was wrong, she whispered. I got caught up in all these ideas without thinking about what they really meant. Please, I'll do anything. We can go to counseling, rebuild our relationship, whatever you want. The problem is, Jessica, I don't want that anymore. You showed me who you really are. Someone who views relationships as transactional, who takes what she wants and discards the rest. Now that you need something from me, suddenly you're willing to reconsider everything. That's not love or partnership. That's opportunism. I stood up, gathering my keys. I'm moving out tomorrow. The divorce papers are ready for your signature. If you contest them, I'm prepared for a legal battle that will drain what little resources you have left. If you sign them as is, I'll provide a one-time payment to help you transition to your new independent life. You planned this all along, she realized, her voice hollow. From the moment I said those words, you were planning your exit. No, I corrected her. I planned this from the moment I realized you saw me as disposable. You taught me an important lesson about self-worth, Jessica. And for that, I suppose I should thank you. I moved out the next day into a new apartment I'd secretly secured weeks earlier. Jessica signed the divorce papers without contest, receiving her settlement payment as promised. I heard through mutual friends that she moved back in with her parents in a different state, her feminist ideals apparently set aside in favor of practical needs. As for me, I continued building my new life, advancing in my career, developing my photography business on the side, maintaining my physical fitness, and yes, eventually starting a genuine relationship with Emma, who showed me what real partnership looks like. 6 months after my divorce was finalized, my first photography exhibition opened at a local gallery. Among the images on display was a striking landscape taken at dawn on that company retreat. The morning I realized I deserved better. The greatest revenge wasn't taking Jessica's financial security, or even her dignity. It was becoming the man I should have been all along. Confident, self-sufficient, and unwilling to accept anything less than a genuine, reciprocal relationship. In trying to diminish me, she inadvertently set me free. Sometimes Jessica still tries to contact me, especially when she's struggling financially. I maintain minimal, business-like communication as needed to finalize any remaining legal matters, but otherwise, I've moved on completely. Our mutual friends eventually learned the full story, and most understood my position, even if they felt I was harsh in my execution. But here's the thing about consequences. They're not harsh or kind. They're just inevitable. Jessica chose to destroy the foundation of our marriage, while expecting the structure to remain standing. When it collapsed, she was simply experiencing the natural outcome of her own actions. This experience taught me that self-respect isn't selfish, it's essential, and that sometimes the most powerful response to someone who treats you as disposable is to simply agree with them and walk away, not in anger or bitterness, but with the calm certainty that you deserve more than they're willing to give. So if you're reading this and recognizing your own relationship in my story, know that you have choices. You don't have to accept unilateral changes to your marriage. You don't have to diminish yourself to accommodate someone else's ideology. And most importantly, you don't have to wait for permission to start building a life that fulfills you. The person who tries to change the rules without your input is telling you exactly how much they value your voice in the relationship. Listen to what they're really saying, not just with their words, but with their actions, and then decide if that's enough for you. Story 3. My family chose my lying ex who cheated with my golden brother. But then karma hit them hard. So I'm a 28-year-old guy who recently got divorced. My ex-wife, who's 26, cheated on me with my 26-year-old brother. Yeah, that happened. I'll get to that in a minute, but let me start from the beginning, so everything makes sense. About a year ago, my brother reached out to me. He wanted to reconnect after years of not talking. Now, you need to understand, growing up, my brother was always the golden child. He could do no wrong in my parents' eyes, and I was just there. It wasn't that they were outright cruel, but I was definitely the afterthought. They made sure he got the best, the attention, everything. That's probably why I left home when I turned 18 and didn't really look back. For years, we didn't speak much. I was doing my own thing, got a decent job, got married, and tried to build a life for myself. But then last year, my brother sent me a message saying that he and our parents missed me and wanted to make things right. I don't know what made me agree to it, but I did. I thought maybe people change, right? Maybe they really wanted to fix things. So I let my brother back into my life. At first, things seemed fine. He started coming around more often, and I introduced him to my wife. They got along well, or so I thought. But after a few months, I started noticing things that didn't sit right with me. My brother was coming over more frequently, sometimes even when I wasn't home. My wife would brush it off, saying they were just hanging out, but I couldn't shake the weird feeling I had. Then, about 4 months ago, my wife dropped a big piece of news. She was pregnant. At first, I was thrilled. I mean, we were married, and I thought we were happy, so naturally I assumed the baby was mine. But something felt off. My brother's visits increased, and every time I'd see him around my wife, there was this tension I couldn't ignore. He'd make comments about the baby, touch her stomach, and say weird things that made me uncomfortable. I tried to convince myself I was overthinking it. I wanted to trust my wife, but the more I thought about it, the more things didn't add up. One night, after she went to bed, I couldn't take it anymore. I grabbed her phone while she was sleeping and started scrolling through her messages. And there it was, the proof I didn't want to find. She had been cheating on me with my brother for months, and the baby wasn't even mine. It was his. I felt sick. I sat there for what felt like hours, just staring at the screen, trying to wrap my head around it. Eventually, I woke her up and confronted her. She tried to deny it at first, but when I showed her the messages, she couldn't lie anymore. She admitted everything. She'd been sleeping with my brother behind my back, and they were planning to tell me about the affair after the baby was born. I couldn't believe it. I just packed a bag and left. The next day, I called my parents to tell them what had happened, thinking maybe for once they'd have my back. But nope, they sided with my brother. They said he'd made a mistake, that I should be the bigger person and that I needed to forgive him for the sake of the family. I couldn't believe it. My own family, who I'd been estranged from for years, was now telling me to forgive the same guy who wrecked my marriage. That's when I decided I was done with all of them. I told my parents I didn't want anything to do with them or my brother, and I filed for divorce. I thought that would be the end of it, but of course, things didn't end there. During the divorce proceedings, my ex tried to milk me for everything I had. She and my brother concocted this story that painted me as controlling and toxic, and of course, my family backed them up. It was like I was the villain in this twisted version of reality where they were the victims and I was the bad guy. In the end, she walked away with a decent chunk of my money, but I managed to keep the house, which was a small victory. So now here I am, divorced, cut off from my family, and trying to pick up the pieces of my life. It's been 2 months since everything blew up, and honestly, I'm still trying to figure out how to move on. I'm working more, trying to focus on myself, but it's not easy. Every now and then, something will remind me of what happened, and it all comes flooding back. But you know what? I'm done with them. My brother, my ex, my parents, they can all have each other. I don't need them. I've spent my whole life being the second choice, the one who gets overlooked, and I'm not going to live like that anymore. I don't know what the future holds, but I know one thing. I'm never letting them back into my life again. All right, so here's where things got worse, if you can believe that. After I left my ex and decided to cut ties with my family, I figured they'd let me move on in peace. I mean, it's not like I had anything left to do with them, right? My wife cheated on me with my brother. My parents took his side, and I was done with all of them. But no, it wasn't that simple. About a month after the divorce, my mom calls me out of the blue. Now keep in mind, I hadn't spoken to her since I left that day, when she basically told me to forgive my brother for wrecking my life. I wasn't really in the mood to talk, but she kept calling over and over. I finally picked up, just to see what she wanted. Right away, she goes into this whole guilt trip speech about how family is family, and no matter what, we should all stick together. She says my brother is really struggling, that he's been having a hard time finding a job, and that now with the baby and all, they're really tight on money. She says they've been relying on the settlement my ex-wife got in the divorce, but that's running out, and they need more help. Then she drops the real kicker. She asked me to help them out. Yeah, you read that right. The same family that threw me under the bus when my wife cheated on me with my brother was now asking me for money to support them. I swear, I almost laughed when she said it. I was like, are you serious right now? You're asking me to help the guy who slept with my wife? You want me to pay for their mess? But she just kept going on about how they're really struggling, how it's not fair to the baby, how I should be the bigger person. I couldn't believe it. After everything they'd put me through, they had the nerve to come to me for help. I told my mom no. Straight up, no. I wasn't going to give them a dime. I told her they could figure it out on their own, just like I had to after they all turned their backs on me. But she wasn't having it. She started crying, saying how I was being selfish, how I wasn't thinking about the baby, how my brother was really sorry and just needed a second chance. She tried to make me feel like the bad guy for not helping them out, but I wasn't falling for it. I told her that this was their problem, not mine, and I wasn't going to get involved. I hung up the phone, thinking that would be the end of it. But no. A few days later, my brother shows up at my apartment. I don't even know how he found out where I lived, but there he was, standing at my door like nothing had happened. I didn't want to let him in, but he wouldn't leave, so I figured I'd hear him out just to get him to go away. He starts off by saying he's sorry, that he messed up, that he never meant for any of this to happen. He says he and my ex didn't plan for things to get this far, and he didn't think it would hurt me this much. I just stared at him, wondering if he really believed the crap he was saying. Like, how could he not think it would hurt me? He stole my wife and my chance at having a family, and now he's standing here trying to act like it was some kind of accident. Then he hits me with this. He says he's been having trouble finding a job since the affair came out, and now that they have the baby, they're really struggling. He says he knows I'm doing well at my job, and he was hoping I could help him out until he gets back on his feet. I didn't know whether to laugh or punch him in the face. I mean, seriously, this guy sleeps with my wife, gets her pregnant, and now he wants me to give him money. I just stood there for a minute, not even knowing what to say. Finally, I told him to get lost. I told him he and my ex made their bed, and now they had to lie in it. I wasn't going to bail them out, and I definitely wasn't going to give him any money. He tried to argue, saying that I was being immature and holding on to a grudge, but I wasn't having any of it. I told him he was lucky I didn't knock him out right then and there. That's when things took a turn. My brother, who's usually all smug and arrogant, suddenly gets really pissed. He starts yelling at me, saying how I've always been jealous of him, how I've always been bitter because our parents treated him better. He says that I'm only refusing to help because I'm still mad that my ex picked him over me. At this point, I'm just staring at him, completely dumbfounded. This guy really thinks he's the victim in all this. He keeps going on about how it's not fair that I won't help out, how he's got a kid now, and how I should let go of the past. He even had the nerve to say that I should be grateful he stepped in because my ex didn't love me anymore anyway. That was it for me. I told him to get out before I called the cops. I wasn't going to stand there and let him throw that in my face like I hadn't already lost everything because of him. He finally left, but not before throwing one last jab at me, saying that I'd regret not helping him, that one day I'd need something from him and he wouldn't be there. I laughed in his face and told him I'd rather live on the street than ever ask him for anything. After that, I thought maybe they'd finally leave me alone. But of course, that was wishful thinking. About a week later, my dad calls me. Now, I hadn't spoken to my dad since the divorce either, and I figured he was calling to do the same thing my mom and brother had already tried, guilt me into helping them. And I was right. He starts off all calm, asking how I'm doing, acting like everything's normal. I wasn't in the mood for small talk, so I cut him off and asked what he wanted. He goes into this whole speech about how I'm the only one in the family who's doing well right now, and how my brother and my ex are going through a tough time. He says that as a family we need to support each other, and that I should help them out because they've got the baby to think about. I told him flat out, no. I wasn't going to help them, and I didn't care about their situation. He tried to argue, saying that I was being selfish, that I wasn't thinking about the bigger picture. He said that if I didn't help now, I'd regret it later because family is all that matters in the end. But you know what? I've been through enough to know that's not true. Sometimes family isn't the people who share your blood. It's the people who stand by you when everyone else turns their back. And my family, they turned their back on me the second they decided my brother's happiness was more important than mine. So I told my dad the same thing I told my mom and brother. I was done. I didn't want anything to do with them, and I wasn't going to be their safety net anymore. I hung up, blocked their numbers, and haven't looked back since. Alright, so here's where things went from just bad to completely ridiculous. After telling my dad I was done and blocking their numbers, I really thought that was it. I mean, how many times can they come back and ask for money, right? Turns out I was dead wrong because they weren't done yet. The next person to try and get in touch with me was my ex-wife. Yeah, the same woman who cheated on me with my brother, got pregnant with his kid, and somehow had the nerve to think I'd still care about what she had to say. It started with a random text from her. She wrote something like, "I know you don't want to talk, but I really need to explain things." I didn't even respond. What was there to explain? She screwed me over, and that was that. But apparently, me ignoring her didn't send the message. So, a couple of days later, I get a call from an unknown number. I picked it up, and guess who it was? Yup, my ex. I was about to hang up, but she started crying right away, saying how she didn't know who else to turn to. She's going on about how things with my brother are falling apart, how he's been out of work, and how they can barely afford to pay the bills. And then she hits me with the whole, you have to help, for the sake of the baby nonsense. Like, seriously? Why on earth would I help them after everything? I told her flat out, no, not my problem. You made your bed, now lie in it. But she just kept going. She said that she knew she messed up, but she thought I'd understand because we were married once, and that should count for something. She even tried to play the remember all the good times we had card, like that would magically make me forget how she destroyed our marriage by hooking up with my own brother. Here's the thing, I wasn't even angry at her anymore. By this point, I was just tired. Tired of her. Tired of my brother. Tired of my whole family acting like I owed them something after all the crap they pulled. So, I told her straight up, I don't owe you anything. You're with my brother now, so he's your problem, not me. That's when she started getting desperate. She started saying stuff like, what about the baby? Don't you care about him? He could have been yours. That one stung a little. I'm not gonna lie. I mean, I always wanted kids, and for a minute there, I thought I was going to be a dad. But then I remembered the baby isn't mine, and honestly, that's not on me anymore. I told her, look, the baby isn't mine, and it's not my job to take care of him or you. You've got a whole family who took your side, remember? Go ask them for help. And I hung up. After that, I figured they'd finally get the hint and leave me alone. Spoiler alert, they didn't. A few days later, I'm at work, just trying to get through the day when my boss comes over to my desk. He looks kind of awkward, which is weird because we usually get along really well. He's like, hey man, there's someone here to see you. I'm thinking, who the hell would come to my job? So I walk out to the lobby, and guess who's standing there? My freaking mom. At this point, I'm just about done with all of this. I mean, who shows up at someone's workplace unannounced? She starts right in on me the second I step into the lobby. She's like, why are you ignoring us? We're family, and family doesn't abandon each other. I told her I wasn't abandoning anyone. I was just done with their nonsense. But she wasn't having it. She starts crying, like full-on sobbing in front of everyone in the lobby, about how I'm punishing the whole family for one mistake. She says my brother is in a really bad place right now, and that they're all struggling because of me. I looked her dead in the eye and told her, you're not struggling because of me. You're struggling because you chose to side with my brother after he destroyed my marriage. That's on you, not me. She kept going, though, saying how they didn't know things would turn out like this and how they just want to make things right. But I didn't buy it for a second. I told her I wasn't going to stand there and argue with her in the middle of my workplace, and that if she wanted to talk, she could call me, if I decided to unblock her number. That shut her up pretty quick. She gave me this whole speech about how I was better than this, and how she raised me to be more forgiving. I almost laughed. Raised me? The same parents who spent my whole childhood putting my brother on a pedestal and treating me like I didn't exist? Yeah, okay. I told her that if she didn't leave, I'd have security escort her out. That's when she really lost it. She started yelling, calling me selfish, saying how I was letting my pride get in the way of helping my family. I just stood there, completely done with the whole thing. Finally, she stormed out, still shouting about how I was going to regret this. I went back to my desk, and my boss just gave me this look like, what the hell was that about? I didn't even bother explaining. What could I say? Sorry, my mom showed up to guilt trip me into giving money to the brother who cheated with my wife? Yeah, that would go over well. I just told him it was family drama and left it at that. I spent the rest of the day in a haze just trying to focus on work, but all I could think about was how my family had gone from screwing me over to straight up harassing me. I mean, they were showing up at my job now. What's next, them camping out in front of my apartment? That night, I finally decided enough was enough. I sent my mom, dad, brother, and even my ex-wife one last message. I told them all the same thing. Don't contact me again. I'm done with this family, and I don't want anything to do with you. Stop harassing me or I'll get a restraining order. Harsh? Maybe. But I was over it. I'd already lost my marriage, my future plans, and any chance at a normal relationship with my family. I wasn't about to let them keep coming back to tear me down even more. And you know what? For the first time in months, I actually felt a little bit of peace after sending those messages. It was like I finally took control of my own life, even if it meant cutting out the people who were supposed to care about me the most. And honestly, I don't regret it. Not one bit. Let's see if they actually leave me alone this time, though. Something tells me this isn't over. So, after sending that final message telling my family to leave me alone, I thought maybe, just maybe, I'd finally get some peace. I mean, how many times do you have to tell people to back off before they get the hint, right? Well, turns out my family doesn't understand boundaries, because it wasn't even a week later that my dad showed up at my apartment. Yeah, no text, no call, just standing at my door like nothing's wrong. I open the door and there he is, acting all casual like he's just swinging by for a chat. He gives me that fake smile he always does when he's trying to get something out of me, and I immediately know this isn't going to be a friendly visit. He starts off with, "Son, we need to talk." I'm already annoyed because seriously, what now? Haven't they all done enough? I stepped outside, closed the door behind me, and told him to make it quick. I wasn't in the mood to deal with more guilt tripping or begging for money. He goes right into it, no warm up this time, just straight to the point. He says, "Your brother and your mother are struggling. Things aren't looking good, and they really need help. You're doing well for yourself now, aren't you? You could easily lend a hand." I couldn't believe it. After everything, this was still their priority, making sure my brother was okay while I got tossed aside like I didn't matter. I cut him off right there and told him, "I'm not giving them any money. I'm not helping them out, and I'm done with this conversation." But he wasn't done. He kept pushing, saying how family helps family, how they were all going through a rough patch and needed me to step up. Step up? The audacity of that just hit me like a brick. I've been stepping up my whole life while they've treated me like nothing. I told him flat out, "You've never stepped up for me, not once. When my wife was cheating on me with my brother, where were you? When I needed you, you were on their side, not mine. So don't come here asking me to step up, now." He just stood there for a second like he wasn't expecting me to actually push back. Then he tried to play the guilt card, of course. He said, "I know we've made mistakes, but we're still your family. We'll always be your family." It's like they think that just saying the word family automatically erases all the crap they've put me through. I was done playing nice. I told him, "Family? You're not my family anymore. Not after everything you've done. You threw me away for him and now you expect me to save you? No, that's not how this works." He started getting defensive, saying how I was being dramatic and how I needed to stop holding a grudge. He said my brother had made a mistake, but that I was overreacting by cutting everyone off. That word, overreacting, it just set me off. I told him, "You think I'm overreacting? My wife slept with my brother. The child she's raising should have been my kid. You all stood by and watched it happen, then asked me to forgive him like nothing ever happened. And now you have the nerve to come here and ask me to help you? That's not overreacting. That's setting boundaries." He was clearly pissed now, but trying to keep it together. He said, "We didn't know things would turn out like this. We just wanted to keep the peace in the family." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Keep the peace? How is letting my brother wreck my marriage keeping the peace? It was so typical of them, though. They've always tried to sweep things under the rug, act like nothing's wrong, and expect me to just go along with it. I told him, "Keeping the peace is just code for ignoring the real problem. You've been ignoring me my whole life, pretending everything's fine as long as my brother's happy. Well, I'm not ignoring it anymore. I'm done." And with that, I turned and started walking back to my door. But of course, he wasn't done. He grabbed my arm, which, let me tell you, was a bad move on his part. I yanked my arm away and told him, "Don't touch me." He looked at me like he didn't even recognize the person standing in front of him. I think he really believed I'd just cave like I used to when I was a kid. But I'm not that kid anymore, and I wasn't about to let them manipulate me into giving them what they wanted. Before he left, he tried one last guilt trip. He said, "You'll regret this. One day, you'll see that family is all that matters." I looked him dead in the eye and said, "No, respect is what matters, and I haven't gotten any from you or anyone else in this family. So, no, I won't regret this." He stood there for a second like he was about to say something, but then he just shook his head and walked away. When I got back inside, I just sat there trying to process everything. It was like no matter what I did, they couldn't accept that I wasn't going to be a part of their mess anymore. They couldn't handle the fact that I wasn't playing by their rules, and it drove them crazy. I guess part of me was hoping that, after all this time, maybe they'd finally realize how badly they messed up. Maybe they'd apologize or at least acknowledge the pain they caused. But that was just wishful thinking. They don't see what they did wrong. They never will. In their minds, I'm the bad guy for walking away. I'm the one breaking up the family. But you know what? I'm okay with that. If standing up for myself means I'm the bad guy in their story, then fine. I'll be the bad guy. I'm not going to let them guilt me into being their doormat again. After my dad left, I blocked him too. I didn't want to deal with any more surprise visits or phone calls. I knew they'd keep trying, but at least for now, I could get some peace. Or at least that's what I thought. A few days later, my phone rang again. This time, it was an unknown number. I let it go to voicemail, figuring it was just another attempt to get to me. But when I checked the message later, I realized it wasn't from my family at all. It was from a lawyer. My ex-wife was trying to sue me for more alimony. That was the final straw. I'm not the same person I was when all this started. I've learned that sometimes you have to fight back. So now I'm gearing up for the legal battle. I've been through hell, but if they want to keep pushing, I'll push right back. This time, they're not going to win. I'm done being the one who gets stepped on. So after getting that voicemail from the lawyer saying my ex-wife was trying to get more alimony out of me, I knew it was time to fight back. I wasn't going to let her or my family drag me through the mud anymore. Enough was enough. First things first, I got in touch with my lawyer. I told him everything that's been going on, from my ex trying to get more money to my family harassing me nonstop. He was just as fed up as I was and said we needed to put an end to this once and for all. So, we started working on a case. Turns out she didn't have much of a leg to stand on. She was already getting a decent settlement from the divorce, and there was no real reason for her to ask for more. But you know how some people are. They'll keep pushing until they get what they want, or until someone stops them. I decided I wasn't going to let her walk all over me anymore, and I wasn't going to let my family keep manipulating me either. My lawyer and I built up a solid defense, and we even found some loopholes that could potentially get me out of paying alimony altogether. That's when things started getting interesting. A few days before the court date, my brother, yes, him again, decided to reach out. This time, he sent me this long-winded email trying to play the big brother role. It was all about how he regretted how things turned out and how he missed having me in his life. I could practically hear his fake sincerity through the words. He even tried to say that the affair wasn't really what it seemed, that it was a mistake and they didn't mean to hurt me. Yeah, sure, a mistake that lasted months and resulted in a kid. Right. I didn't respond to the email because honestly, what was the point? I knew he was only reaching out because he and my ex were scared they might lose the alimony, and they were probably hoping to guilt trip me into backing down. But there was no way I was going to let that happen. I was done with them. They had their chance to fix things, and they blew it, repeatedly. So the court date finally rolls around, and I'm ready. My lawyers got everything set, and we're walking in there prepared for whatever they throw at us. My ex and her lawyers show up, and surprise, surprise, she's got my brother with her for support. I wasn't shocked, but it was still annoying seeing them together, acting like they weren't the ones who blew up my life. They didn't even have the decency to look ashamed or embarrassed about it. They just sat there whispering to each other and pretending like they were the victims in all this. When it was finally our turn to present the case, my lawyer laid it all out. He brought up how my ex was already getting more than enough from the divorce settlement, how she wasn't entitled to more money just because things weren't going well for her. He even pointed out that she'd been dishonest during the divorce proceedings, hiding the fact that she and my brother had been seeing each other for months before the divorce was finalized. Basically, we made it clear that she didn't deserve a penny more from me. Her lawyer tried to argue that she needed more money to support the baby, again, not my kid. But it didn't really hold up. My lawyer shut that down quick. He said it wasn't my responsibility to take care of their kid, and the judge seemed to agree. The best part? My lawyer had also gathered evidence of my family's harassment over the past few months. The texts, the surprise visits, my mom showing up at my job, all of it. He presented it to the judge as proof that they were trying to manipulate and pressure me into giving them money. The judge wasn't impressed with their behavior, and you could see the look on my ex's face when she realized things weren't going her way. By the end of it, the judge ruled in my favor. Not only did my ex not get any more alimony, but they actually reduced the amount I was paying her. The judge saw right through her act and decided that she didn't deserve as much as she'd originally gotten. It was the best outcome I could have hoped for. After the ruling, my ex and brother stormed out of the courtroom without saying a word to me. I could see the anger and frustration on their faces, and honestly, it felt good. For the first time in this whole mess, I felt like I'd actually won. I wasn't the one getting walked all over anymore. But it didn't end there. A few days after the court ruling, my dad tried to call me again. He left a voicemail, something about how I'd ruined the family and how I was tearing everyone apart. I didn't even listen to the whole thing. I just deleted it and blocked his number again. I wasn't going to let them pull me back into their drama. I was done, for real this time. And honestly, I feel free now. For the first time in years, I'm not carrying the weight of my family's expectations or my ex's lies or my brother's betrayal. I'm just me. I've cut them all out and I'm focusing on myself. It's not always easy, and yes, sometimes it still hurts to think about everything that happened. But I'm not letting it control my life anymore. Since the court case, I've been focusing on my work, my friends, and just living my life. I'm not going to lie and say everything's perfect now, because it's not. I still have moments where I get angry, where I think about what could have been if things had gone differently. But those moments are getting fewer and farther between. The truth is, I'm better off without them. My family, my ex, they were toxic and it took me a long time to see it, but now I do. I'm never going back to that life. I've got a fresh start now, and I'm not going to waste it. So yeah, that's the end of it. My family tried to screw me over, my ex tried to take more than she deserved, but in the end, I came out on top. I'm not sure what the future holds, but for the first time in a long time, I'm excited to find out. And if they ever try to come back into my life again, well, let's just say I'm not afraid to fight back anymore. Update 1. Alright, so here's where things took another turn I wasn't expecting. After the whole mess with the divorce and cutting my family off, I thought I was finally done with all their nonsense. But you know what they say, right? When it rains, it pours. I should have known they wouldn't just leave me alone. A few weeks ago, I get a message from someone I hadn't spoken to in years, my aunt. Now let me explain a little bit about her. She's my dad's sister, and growing up, we were never really close. She kind of stayed out of family drama, so I didn't think much of her. But apparently, she's been keeping up with everything going on because she heard about my divorce and reached out. At first, I thought maybe she was just checking in, seeing how I was doing, but nope. She had her own agenda, just like everyone else in my family. She started by saying she's worried about my parents and how the whole situation has torn the family apart. Then she jumps right into asking me if I would reconsider talking to them again. She said they were struggling without me, and that it wasn't too late to fix things. I was honestly stunned. Like, are you serious? After everything that happened, I'm the one who's supposed to fix things? I told her straight up that I wasn't interested in fixing anything. I made it clear that they were the ones who threw me under the bus, not the other way around. And I wasn't going to pretend like everything was fine just because they were struggling now. She tried to guilt trip me, saying things like, "Your dad isn't getting any younger," and "Family is all we've got at the end of the day." I've heard it all before. And it didn't work then. And it definitely wasn't working now. I told her the same thing I told my parents. I don't owe them anything. I'm not going to be the one to sweep everything under the rug just because they've decided now's the time they want me back in their lives. She didn't take that too well. She started getting defensive, saying how my parents were just trying to do what's best for everyone, and that I needed to let go of my anger. I wasn't even angry at that point, just exhausted from having the same conversation over and over. I told her that if she really cared about the family, maybe she should have stepped in when all this was happening instead of showing up now when it's convenient for her. The conversation ended pretty quickly after that. She said she was disappointed in me, which honestly was kind of laughable. Disappointed? In me? The one person in this family who's actually tried to stand up for themselves? Yeah, okay, so that's where I'm at now. They're still trying to pull me back in, still trying to make me feel like the bad guy for not wanting to deal with their drama. But I'm not falling for it. I've come too far to go back now. I've got my own life to live, and I'm not going to spend it cleaning up their messes. Story 4. This story is titled, "After my wife's birthday, she cheated on me with my cousin, and my parents demanded that I don't ruin their new relationship. So I went and took the diamond bracelet and the car I had given her. Now she cries and asks for another chance." Hi everyone. Before we dive in, a quick favor. If you enjoy content like this, please hit the subscribe button. It's free, supports the channel, and makes sure you never miss out on amazing videos. Alright, let's get started. Alright, so let me just lay it out there because I honestly still can't believe this happened. My wife Jenna just turned 28, and I wanted to make her birthday one she'd never forget. Oh, she definitely won't forget it. But not for the reasons I had in mind. We'd been married for 3 years. Things weren't perfect. What marriage is. But I thought we were solid. I mean, I was the guy who made sure to remember anniversaries, picked up her favorite snacks after work, and planned cute little dates even when I was swamped at work. So, when her birthday was coming up, I figured I'd go all out to show her how much she meant to me. The plan was simple. Surprise dinner with her close friends and family at her favorite Italian spot, a custom cake that matched her favorite flowers, lavender and daisies if you care, and the cherry on top, a diamond bracelet she'd been eyeing for months. It wasn't cheap, but I figured why not? You only turn 28 once, right? So the night kicks off, and everything's going great. Jenna's laughing. Everyone's toasting to her. And I feel like I nailed it. I even had her favorite song queued up for when they brought out the cake. Everyone was having a good time, and I was just happy watching her enjoy herself. But then, somewhere between dinner and the cake, I noticed she was gone. I wasn't immediately worried. She could have been in the bathroom or stepped out to make a call. No big deal. But then 15 minutes passed, then 20. That's when I started looking around. I asked a few people at the table if they'd seen her, but nobody knew where she was. I walked around the restaurant, checking the bar area and the front entrance, but no sign of her. Then I remembered there was a back hallway near the restrooms that led to a storage area. I thought, maybe she needed some air or something, so I headed that way, and that's when everything went straight to hell. As I got closer, I heard voices, low, hushed, and way too close. My stomach dropped, but I kept walking. The voices were coming from the coat closet at the end of the hall. The door wasn't fully shut, and I could see the faint glow of a phone screen through the crack. My brain was screaming at me to turn around, but I didn't. I pushed the door open, and there they were, Jenna and my cousin Tyler. They were all over each other, her hands in his hair, his hands around her waist. The look on their faces when they saw me is something I'll never forget. Jenna's eyes went wide, like a kid caught stealing candy. Tyler froze like he'd seen a ghost. For a second, nobody said anything, and then I lost it. I grabbed Tyler by the collar and shoved him against the wall so hard the coats on the rack shook. "What the hell is wrong with you?" I yelled. Jenna tried to step between us, saying, "It's not what it looks like." But I just laughed bitterly. "Not what it looks like? You're making out with my cousin at your birthday party. What else could it be?" Tyler started mumbling something like, "It just happened," but I cut him off with, "You don't get to talk to me." I let him go and turned to Jenna. "Don't bother coming home tonight," I said, my voice shaking with anger. She opened her mouth to speak, but I wasn't interested. "We're done," I said, and walked out. The rest of the night was a blur. I didn't go back to the table, didn't explain anything to anyone. I just grabbed my car keys and drove. I ended up at a 24-hour diner, sitting in a booth by myself, trying to process what the hell just happened. How could she do this? And with Tyler, of all people. Tyler and I were never close. He's the guy in the family who's always bragging about how smooth he is, even though he's pushing 30 and still living off odd jobs and couch surfing. I should have known he'd pull something like this. But Jenna? I never saw that coming. When I finally went home, Jenna wasn't there. Good. I didn't want to see her. I spent the night replaying everything in my head, every moment that led up to finding them in that closet. Were there signs I missed? Did she ever seem distant? Was I just blind to it? The next morning, I woke up to a bunch of missed calls and texts from her. They all started with, "Can we talk?" and "It's not what you think," before turning into, "I'm sorry," and "Please don't do this." I ignored them all. What was there to say? She made her choice when she decided to hook up with Tyler in the middle of her birthday party. By noon, I got a call from my mom. She wanted to know what happened because Jenna had apparently told her we got into a fight. I told her the truth. "She was kissing Tyler at the restaurant," I said bluntly. There was silence on the other end before she sighed and said, "We'll talk later." Talk later? That's it? No outrage, no anger, no "I can't believe she'd do that to you"? Just, "We'll talk later." It felt like the world was upside down. By the end of the day, word had spread. Family started calling me, some asking if it was true, others telling me to calm down and not do anything rash. Rash? Jenna destroyed our marriage, and I'm the one being told to calm down. That night, Jenna showed up at the house. I didn't let her in. She stood on the porch crying, saying she'd made a mistake and that we could work through it. I just stared at her through the window and said, "Go stay with Tyler. You two deserve each other." And that was that. At least for the time being. I thought I could at least rely on my family for support. You'd think they'd have my back, right? After all, my wife and my cousin betrayed me. Pretty straightforward, right? Wrong. Apparently, my family had other ideas about loyalty. 2 days after the disaster at the restaurant, my mom called and asked me to come over. "We need to talk," she said, with that tone she uses when she's trying to be serious. I figured it'd be a chance for them to check on me, offer some support, maybe even rip Tyler a new one for what he did. I wasn't expecting a full-blown intervention. I showed up at their house and immediately noticed the weird vibe. My dad was sitting at the dining table, his arms crossed, and my mom was pacing like she was rehearsing a speech in her head. The second I walked in, I knew this wasn't going to go the way I hoped. "Sit down," my dad said, motioning to the chair across from him. No, "Hey, how are you holding up?" Or, "Sorry about what happened. Just straight to business." I sat down anyway, figuring I'd hear them out. "We need to talk about Jenna and Tyler," my mom started. My stomach churned. I thought they were about to tell me Tyler had apologized, or maybe Jenna was leaving town. Nope. What came out of her mouth next made me want to flip the table. "Look, what happened wasn't ideal," she said, like they had accidentally spilled a drink at dinner. "But these things happen." "These things happen?" I repeated, my voice louder than I intended. What does that even mean? She cheated on me with Tyler, in case you forgot. My dad held up his hand like he was a referee calling a timeout. Son, we're not saying it's okay, but we need to be realistic. If Jenna and Tyler have feelings for each other, you can't force them to stay apart. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. I actually laughed, not because it was funny, but because it was so absurd. Are you seriously trying to justify this? They were making out in a closet at her birthday party. She's my wife. Tyler's my cousin. What part of this is okay? Listen, my mom said, sitting down next to me, like she thought a softer tone would make this better. Nobody's saying it's okay, but if they have something real? Something real? I interrupted. They've been sneaking around behind my back. That's not real. That's disgusting. At this point, my blood was boiling. I looked at my dad, hoping for some backup, but he just sighed and said, "You need to move on. Holding on to anger won't help anyone. Move on." That's what they wanted me to do. Just pretend like none of this happened. Let Jenna and Tyler skip off into the sunset and move on. It was like they were more concerned about keeping the family together than acknowledging the fact that I was the one who got screwed over. You're unbelievable, I said, standing up. You're seriously taking their side? We're not taking sides, my mom said quickly. We just think it's better for everyone if we handle this calmly. Calmly? I laughed bitterly. You want me to handle this calmly? Fine. Here's me being calm. I'm done with both of them. And if you want to keep making excuses for them, then I'm done with you too. My mom looked hurt, but I didn't care. I wasn't about to sit there and let them act like Jenna and Tyler's betrayal was just some minor inconvenience we could all work through. I stormed out, slamming the door behind me. On the drive home, I kept thinking about the conversation in my head. I couldn't wrap my mind around how they could be so nonchalant about everything. My wife cheated on me with my cousin, and my parents wanted to sweep it under the rug for the sake of family unity. It was insane. By the time I got home, my phone was blowing up with messages. Some were from Jenna, who was still trying to apologize and explain. The rest were from my parents, telling me I was being unreasonable and that I needed to come back so we could talk things through. Talk things through? What was there to talk about? Jenna and Tyler made their choices, and now they had to deal with the fallout. If my parents wanted to play peacemakers, that was on them. But I wasn't going to be part of their twisted idea of family. Later that night, my sister Emma called. Emma's the only one in the family who's ever really had my back. She's a few years younger than me, and she's always been the first to call people out on their BS. I heard what happened, she said, skipping the small talk. Mom and Dad are acting like idiots. You don't have to tell me twice, I said. I can't believe they're defending Jenna and Tyler. They're not defending them, she said. Not exactly. They just don't want the family to fall apart. Well, newsflash, it already has, I snapped. And it's not my fault. I know, she said quickly. I just wanted you to know that I'm on your side. What they did to you was disgusting, and you have every right to be pissed. Hearing that meant more to me than I expected. At least someone in my family understood what I was going through. I appreciate that, I said. But I don't know how I'm supposed to deal with Mom and Dad. They're acting like I'm the problem. You're not, she said firmly. They're just scared of confrontation. You know how they are. They avoid dealing with the real issues. We talked for a while longer, mostly about how messed up the whole situation was. By the time we hung up, I felt a little better, knowing Emma had my back. But the frustration with my parents was still there, simmering under the surface. The next day, my dad texted me, asking if I was ready to talk like adults. I didn't respond. I was done talking. They'd made their stance clear, and so had I. From that point on, I kept my distance. I didn't go over for Sunday dinners, didn't answer their calls, and didn't bother trying to explain myself anymore. If they couldn't see how wrong they were, then that was on them. It's funny how quickly people show their true colors when things go south. I thought my parents would be the first ones to stand by me, but instead, they chose to prioritize the people who stabbed me in the back. I don't know what their endgame is, but I'm not playing along. If they want to defend Jenna and Tyler, they can have them. I'm out. I'll let you know about my next steps soon. Update 1. All right, here's the next update because honestly, this just keeps getting crazier. After everything that happened with Jenna and Tyler, I was trying my best to move on, or at least keep my head down and not think about it. I had cut off most contact with my parents. I thought I'd already dealt with the worst of it. Jenna was out of the house, I wasn't answering her calls, and I was trying to focus on piecing my life back together. But of course, Jenna found a way to stir the pot again. About a week after the fallout, she texted me from a random number, because yes, I blocked her on everything else. I wasn't even going to open it, but curiosity won. The message started off with her usual nonsense. Please, can we just talk? I need to explain. Blah, blah, blah. I was about to delete it when I saw the last part. And I think I should keep the bracelet. It was a gift, after all. The nerve of this woman. She wanted to keep the diamond bracelet I had given her, a bracelet I worked my ass off to afford. After everything she'd done, I couldn't even wrap my head around the entitlement. Let me back up for a second. This wasn't just some random piece of jewelry. That bracelet was expensive. I'd spent months saving up for it, thinking I was doing something special for her. She'd wanted it for ages, and I figured it would be the perfect way to show her how much she meant to me. And now, after cheating on me with my cousin, she thought she deserved to keep it? I didn't respond right away. I needed time to calm down, but the more I thought about it, the angrier I got. There was no way I was letting her walk away with that bracelet like it was some kind of trophy for being the most entitled cheater of the year. So I did some digging. Jenna had moved into a little apartment in the next town over. Probably the best Tyler could afford since, let's face it, the guy's a broke joke. I wasn't planning to show up unannounced, but I knew where she worked. Jenna had been working at a boutique jewelry store downtown for a while, and I figured she might have kept the bracelet in her locker there for safekeeping. The next morning, I stopped by the store under the guise of browsing. I walked in, made some small talk with one of her coworkers, and casually glanced around. Sure enough, there was Jenna at the back of the store, helping a customer. She spotted me almost immediately, and her face turned bright red. "What are you doing here?" she hissed, walking over. "I'm here for the bracelet," I said, keeping my voice calm. "You know, the one I bought for you." She looked like I'd just slapped her. "Are you serious right now?" "It was a gift. It was a gift for my wife," I shot back. "You're not my wife anymore, Jenna. So hand it over." She stammered something about how unfair I was being, but I wasn't interested in hearing her excuses. "You can give it to me now, or I can involve the cops." "Your call," I said. At that point, her manager noticed the commotion and came over. Jenna tried to spin some sob story, but I cut her off. I showed the receipt for the bracelet. Yes, I kept it, because I'm that kind of guy, and explained that it was purchased by me and never gifted under any legal context. The manager, clearly uncomfortable, sided with me. Jenna stormed off to the back of the store, muttering under her breath, and came back with the bracelet in hand. "Here," she snapped, practically throwing it at me. "I hope you're happy." "Oh, I am," I said, pocketing the bracelet. "Thanks for making this easy." I walked out of that store feeling like a weight had been lifted. I wasn't just taking back a piece of jewelry, I was reclaiming my dignity. After that, I took the bracelet straight to a jeweler and sold it. I didn't care about getting full value for it. Just seeing it gone was enough for me. The jeweler gave me cash on the spot, and I used it to treat myself to something I actually wanted: a new laptop and some upgrades for my car. Of course, Jenna wasn't going to let it go without making a fuss. That night, she texted me again. "You're pathetic. You stole my bracelet, and I hope you feel good about yourself." I didn't even bother responding. What could she possibly say to justify keeping it after everything she did? The next day, I got a call from my mom. Apparently, Jenna had called her to complain. "She says you're being spiteful," my mom said. "Spiteful?" I laughed. "She cheated on me with Tyler and thought she could keep the bracelet I bought her." "I don't think so." "Well," my mom started, but I cut her off. "Don't even try to defend her, Mom." She sighed, but didn't push it further. I guess even she got the idea that I'm not backing. The funniest part of the whole thing? Tyler apparently called me later that week, leaving a voicemail about how I needed to grow up and let Jenna have the bracelet. I didn't even bother listening to the whole thing. I just deleted it. If he thought I cared about his opinion, he was even dumber than I gave him credit for. At the end of the day, it wasn't about the money or the bracelet itself. It was about principle. Jenna didn't get to walk away from our marriage with her head held high, acting like she was the victim. Taking back the bracelet was my way of saying, "You don't get to win this time." And let me tell you, it felt damn good. Then there was the car. A little backstory here. Last year, I bought Jenna a sleek red coupe for our anniversary. It wasn't brand new, but it was clean, sporty, and something she'd been hinting about for months. I figured, why not? She was my wife, and I thought she deserved it. Fast forward to now, and the thought of her and Tyler cruising around in my car made my blood boil. Legally, the car was still under my name. I handled all the payments, insurance, and paperwork. Jenna didn't contribute a dime toward it. When I kicked her out after the birthday fiasco, I didn't think to take the car back right away. Honestly, I was too focused on getting her out of my life. But as time went on and I kept hearing through the grapevine about her and Tyler playing house, it started eating away at me. Why the hell should they get to enjoy something I paid for? The tipping point came when my buddy Eric, who works at a dealership, called me out of nowhere. "Dude," he said, "I think I just saw your car." "What do you mean?" I asked. "This scruffy guy, dark hair, kind of tall, brought it in for maintenance," Eric explained. "He seemed nervous, like he didn't know what he was doing. It didn't take a genius to figure out who he was talking about. Tyler. The nerve of this guy. Not only was he using my car, but he thought he could just waltz into a dealership and act like it was his? Do me a favor, I told Eric. Hold on to it. Don't let them take it back out. I'll be there first thing tomorrow. The next morning, I showed up at the dealership with all the paperwork proving the car was mine. The title, the insurance, everything. Eric had already explained the situation to his boss, so when I got there, it was pretty smooth. They handed me the keys and said, "It's all yours." Let me tell you, sliding into the driver's seat of that car felt amazing. It wasn't just about the car itself, it was about taking back something that was mine. I drove it out of that lot with the biggest grin on my face. Of course, it didn't take long for Jenna and Tyler to realize what had happened. Jenna called me first, which I ignored. Then came the texts. "Why did you take the car? We need it. You're being so petty. Just let us have it." Petty. The audacity of this woman. I didn't respond to her, but I wasn't about to let them guilt trip me into giving it back. Then Tyler called. I didn't recognize the number at first, so I picked up. "Yo, what's your problem, man?" he started, his voice all cocky like he thought he could intimidate me. "My problem?" I said, laughing. "You're driving a car I paid for. That's my problem." "You can't just take it," he shouted. "That's illegal." "Actually, it's not," I replied. "The car's in my name. Legally, it's mine. You might want to brush up on how ownership works." He started cussing me out, calling me childish and bitter. I just hung up. I wasn't about to waste my time arguing with someone who couldn't even hold down a job. The fallout from this was hilarious. Emma called me later that night, laughing so hard she could barely get the words out. "Tyler's losing his mind," she said. "He's telling everyone you stole the car and left them stranded." I couldn't help but laugh. Stranded? He's got 2 legs. He can figure it out. Apparently, Tyler and Jenna had been relying on the car for everything. Groceries, errands, even job hunting. Not that Tyler ever actually followed through with that. Without it, they were basically stuck. Emma said my parents were trying to mediate again, telling me I should have given them a heads up before taking the car. "Why would I do that?" I asked. "So they could try to hide it or trash it before I got there." She agreed with me, of course, but it didn't stop my mom from leaving me a voicemail later that night. "Honey, I understand you're upset, but taking the car wasn't the right way to handle this. They're struggling, and you're making things harder for them." I didn't even bother calling her back. Struggling? Maybe they should have thought about that before stabbing me in the back. The funniest part? A couple of days later, I found out Tyler tried to borrow money from my parents to get a new car. My dad told him to figure it out, which honestly surprised me. Maybe they were finally starting to see through his nonsense. As for me, I've been driving the car again, and it feels like justice every time I get behind the wheel. Every time I park it in front of my house, I smile a little, knowing that Jenna and Tyler are out there scrambling for rides. This whole situation has been a mess, but if there's one thing I've learned, it's this. You don't owe anyone anything, especially not people who've betrayed you. Taking back the car wasn't just about the car. It was about reminding myself that I'm not some doormat they can walk all over. So, to anyone out there dealing with entitled exes or shady family members, take your power back. Whether it's a car, a bracelet, or just your peace of mind, don't let them win. And to Tyler and Jenna, if by some miracle you're reading this, good luck catching the bus. I'll keep you guys updated. Thanks for sticking around. Update 2. Alright, so if you thought the drama with Jenna and Tyler was done after the whole car situation, buckle up. Turns out karma wasn't quite finished with those two yet. This time, the universe decided to take the wheel and show Tyler exactly what happens when you think you can coast through life on lies and entitlement. It all started with a call from Emma, my younger sister. At this point, she's pretty much my go-to source for updates about what's going on with the family, since I'm not exactly on speaking terms with most of them anymore. "You're not going to believe this," she said, barely able to keep from laughing. "What now?" I asked, already bracing myself for some new nonsense involving Jenna and Tyler. "Tyler got arrested," she said, and I swear I almost dropped my phone. "Arrested? For what?" "Shoplifting," he replied, her voice dripping with amusement. "Apparently, he tried to steal a couple of cell phones from some electronics store and got caught red-handed." I'll admit, I laughed out loud when she told me. Of course Tyler would do something that stupid. This is the same guy who thought it was a good idea to hook up with my wife at her birthday party and then act like he was the victim when I took my car back. Honestly, it was only a matter of time before his recklessness caught up with him. Emma gave me the full rundown. Apparently, Tyler had been trying to flip the phones for quick cash, probably because he and Jenna were broke. He walked into the store, grabbed a couple of the display models, and tried to slip them into his bag like no one would notice. Unfortunately for him, the store had cameras everywhere, and the staff spotted him almost immediately. By the time he tried to walk out, There were two employees waiting for him at the door. They confronted him, called the cops, and Tyler ended up getting hauled off in handcuffs. I couldn't stop laughing as Emma told me the story. It was so perfectly Tyler, thinking he could just breeze through life without consequences, only to get slapped in the face by reality. He's a real genius, huh? I said, still chuckling. It gets better, Emma said. Guess who bailed him out? Let me guess, I said. Mom and Dad? Yup, she confirmed. Mom was all, we can't just leave him in there, and Dad went along with it. Unbelievable. My parents had bent over backward to defend Tyler, ever since this whole mess started, and now they were literally bailing him out of jail. What about Jenna? I asked. Was she with him? She wasn't there when it happened, Emma said. But I heard she's freaking out because now they're even more broke than before. Tyler had to promise to pay Mom and Dad back, but you know that's never going to happen. That part didn't surprise me at all. Tyler had never been good with money, or responsibility for that matter. He'd spent his entire life skating by, relying on his charm to get out of sticky situations. But charm only gets you so far when you're being booked for theft. Over the next few days, word of Tyler's arrest spread through the family like wildfire. Most people were trying to keep it hush-hush, but you know how gossip works. By the end of the week, everyone knew what happened. The reactions were pretty mixed. Some people, mostly my parents and Tyler's mom, tried to downplay it, saying it was just a mistake and that he was under a lot of stress. Meanwhile, others were outright roasting him for being so stupid. Who tries to steal phones from a store with cameras everywhere? One of my cousins said during a family group chat, which I'm thankfully not part of anymore, but got relayed to me by Emma. Tyler, that's who, another cousin replied. The whole thing was a mess, and I was living for it. Not because I wanted to see Tyler fail, but because it was so satisfying to watch karma catch up to him. He'd spent so long thinking he could get away with anything, and now he was finally facing the consequences of his action. Jenna, on the other hand, was apparently not handling it well. According to Emma, she'd been trying to spin the whole thing as just a misunderstanding to anyone who would listen. She's telling people Tyler was framed, or that the staff at the store overreacted, Emma said. It's pathetic. Framed? I laughed. What does she think this is? A crime drama? It was clear that Jenna was desperate to keep up appearances, but the cracks in their little fairy tale life were getting harder and harder to ignore. Not long after the arrest, I got another call from Emma. You're not going to believe this, she said, and by now, that phrase had become pretty standard in our conversations. What now? I asked, half expecting some new ridiculous twist. Jenna's been calling around asking for money, she said. Apparently Tyler's legal fees are adding up, and they're broke. I couldn't help but laugh. And who's actually giving her money? Not many people, Emma said. But she's trying. Even asked Mom and Dad again. But I think Dad finally put his foot down. Hearing that was surprising, but also a little satisfying. Maybe my parents were finally starting to realize that bailing out Tyler and Jenna wasn't their responsibility. As for me, I wasn't about to get involved. Let them figure it out. They made their bed, and now they had to lie in it. The funniest part of all this? Tyler's arrest completely destroyed whatever shred of credibility he had left in the family. Even some of the relatives who'd been defending him before were starting to see him for what he really was. A lazy, entitled screw-up who thought he was smarter than everyone else. And Jenna? She was stuck right in the middle of it. She'd hitched her wagon to Tyler, and now she was watching it crash and burn. The way I see it, this was the universe's way of evening the score. Tyler and Jenna thought they could betray me and walk away unscathed, but life had other plans. Now, they're broke, humiliated, and scrambling to pick up the pieces while I'm out here living my best life. It's funny how things work out sometimes. I'm now busy filing for divorce, but I'll get back to you with how it'll go, or if anything else comes up. Update 3. Hey again, this is it. The grand finale, hopefully. After months of Jenna and Tyler's nonsense, family drama, and more entitlement than I thought humanly possible, everything finally came to a head. And let me tell you, it was worth the wait. So, after Tyler's little stunt with the shoplifting and Jenna begging everyone for money, I thought I'd heard the last of them. They were broke, humiliated, and sinking fast, and I was content to let them drown in their own mess. But of course, Jenna had one more trick up her sleeve. It started with a call from my lawyer. You're not going to like this, he said. Jenna's lawyer reached out. She's trying to file for alimony. I swear, I almost choked on my coffee when he said that. Alimony? From me? After she cheated with my cousin, got kicked out of my house, and tried to keep the car and bracelet I bought her? The nerve of this woman was off the charts. Can she even do that? I asked, trying to wrap my head around it. Well, technically she can file, my lawyer said. But given the circumstances, her infidelity, the fact that you have receipts for everything you've contributed to the marriage, and her current living situation, It's unlikely she'd win. Still, we'll need to gather evidence and be prepared to fight it. Gather evidence? That part was easy. I had text messages, witnesses, and even some photos from people at the birthday party who'd seen Jenna and Tyler sneaking off together. If she wanted to play this game, I was ready. Over the next couple of weeks, my lawyer and I put together a rock-solid case. We had proof of her affair, proof that she'd contributed next to nothing financially during our marriage, and proof that she was living with Tyler, who, let's be honest, wasn't exactly a step up from me. When the day of the court hearing arrived, I walked in with my head held high. Jenna, on the other hand, looked like she'd barely slept. Tyler was there too, sitting in the back like some kind of supportive boyfriend. I couldn't help but smirk when I saw him. The hearing itself was almost laughable. Jenna's lawyer tried to argue that she'd sacrificed so much during our marriage and deserved financial support to help her get back on her feet. Sacrificed? I said to my lawyer under my breath. What did she sacrifice? Her dignity? When it was my turn to speak, I kept it simple. I laid out the facts. Jenna cheated on me with Tyler, which multiple people could confirm. She didn't contribute financially to the marriage. The car and bracelet she tried to keep were bought and paid for by me. And lastly, she was now living with Tyler, who should have been the one supporting her. The judge didn't seem impressed by her lawyer's arguments. In fact, I'm pretty sure I saw him roll his eyes at one point. By the end of it, Jenna's case fell apart like a house of cards. The judge denied her request for alimony and basically told her to figure out her life without dragging me into it. Walking out of that courtroom felt like winning the Super Bowl. I didn't just win, I crushed her. Jenna didn't even look at me as she left, and Tyler followed behind her like a kicked puppy. But the story doesn't end there. Oh no. The universe decided to throw in one last little gift to make sure the chapter was closed in the most satisfying way possible. A few weeks after the court hearing, Emma called me again. Jenna and Tyler broke up, she said. Apparently, their little love story hit the rocks once they realized they couldn't survive on charm and sob stories alone. Tyler couldn't hold down a job, Jenna was fed up with being broke, and the stress of it all finally blew up in their faces. Do you want to know the best part? Emma asked, barely able to contain herself. Hit me, I said. Jenna tried to move back in with Mom and Dad, and they said no. I was stunned. My parents, who had bent over backward for Jenna and Tyler, finally drew the line? It was almost too good to be true. Why did they say no? I asked. Because even they're sick of her, Emma said. I think Dad finally realized she was just using them. Hearing that was the cherry on top of everything. Jenna, who thought she could manipulate everyone and come out on top, was now completely alone. Tyler was gone. My parents were done enabling her, and I was free to live my life without her nonsense dragging me down. As for me, life's been pretty damn good. I sold the red coupe, again, and bought myself a new truck. Looking back on everything, I can honestly say I have no regrets. Jenna and Tyler thought they could betray me and walk away unscathed, but karma had other plans. And while they're out there dealing with the consequences of their actions, I'm here living my best life. So to anyone dealing with cheaters, liars, or entitled family members, don't let them win. Stand your ground, take back what's yours, and let karma handle the rest. And to Jenna and Tyler, again, thanks for the free lessons on what not to do in life. Hope you're enjoying your happily ever after. Oh wait, you're not. Victory never tasted so sweet. Story 5. So here's the thing. I, 37M, have always been there for my family, especially my niece. She's 13, and her mom, my sister-in-law, has had a rough go of it since my brother passed a few years back. I stepped in where I could, helped with expenses, made sure my niece didn't go without. I never thought twice about it, honestly. Family's family, right? Anyway, the day this all went down started like any other. I was heading home after a regular day at work, looking forward to putting my feet up and maybe watching some TV. But as soon as I walked through the door, I noticed something was off. My phone was ringing nonstop. I checked it and saw a few missed calls from my sister-in-law, and some messages too, though none of them made much sense. She just kept saying, "You need to pick up. It's serious," and "You're in trouble." No context? Nothing. Now, I'll admit, I brushed it off at first. I figured it was some drama with her finances or whatever. She'd been in and out of financial messes lately, and I'd had to bail her out before, so I ignored it. Figured I'd call her back later once I'd settled in. But then, maybe an hour later, I got another call, but this time it was from a blocked number. I answered, figuring it was some scam call, but then the person on the other end said, "Hello, is this my name? This is Detective so-and-so. We need you to come down to the station." That got my attention. I can't even explain the dread that crept up. It's that feeling where you know something's seriously wrong and you have no clue what it is, but your gut is just screaming at you. I asked what was going on, but they wouldn't tell me anything over the phone, just insisted I come down as soon as possible. So I grabbed my keys and went straight to the station, trying to mentally run through every possible reason I could be there. But I couldn't come up with anything that made sense. When I got there, they led me into one of those cold, sterile rooms with a metal table and chairs, and the whole atmosphere made me feel like I was in some bad crime show. The detective sat down across from me, looking dead serious, and asked if I knew why I was there. I said no, but by that point my mind was racing, trying to piece together what the hell was going on. Then he told me. He said my niece had come forward with some serious accusations against me. I didn't understand at first, just blinked at him, trying to process. But when he repeated himself and explained exactly what she was claiming, I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. She was accusing me of something I wouldn't even repeat out loud, something that, honestly, made my skin crawl just hearing it. I was stunned, completely frozen in shock. My first instinct was to deny it, of course. I told the detective this had to be some kind of mistake, that I'd never do anything like that, and that I couldn't believe she'd say something so horrible. I mean, this was my niece, a kid I'd practically helped raise since her dad passed. It just didn't make any sense. But here's the thing. The detective was looking at me like I was guilty right off the bat, like he'd already made up his mind. He said they'd already started an investigation and that things weren't looking good for me. Apparently, they'd talked to her mother too, and she was fully supportive of her daughter. Hearing that stung, but it also confused the hell out of me. I mean, why would my sister-in-law just back this up? Where was all this even coming from? At that point, I was panicking. It's one thing to have someone make accusations behind your back, but to hear it from a detective while you're sitting there in an interrogation room, it's a whole other level of fear. He kept pressing, asking if I had anything to hide, if there was anything I wanted to come clean about. I was starting to feel like I was losing my mind, like this was all some sort of nightmare I couldn't wake up from. Eventually, he asked if they could search my house. He made it sound like I didn't have a choice, so I agreed. I mean, I had nothing to hide, and at that point, I just wanted to do whatever I could to prove my innocence. But the idea of them going through my home, combing through everything like I was some sort of criminal, made me sick. After hours of questioning and waiting around, they finally let me go, but they didn't really clear anything up. The detective just told me to stay available, and that they'd be following up soon. I left that station in a daze, my mind spinning with questions I didn't have answers to. How did things come to this? Why would my niece say something so awful? And what the hell was my sister-in-law thinking, backing her up like that? When I got home, the reality hit me like a ton of bricks. This accusation could ruin my life, my job, my relationships, everything I'd worked for. It could all go down the drain because of a lie. I paced around my house, replaying the day's events over and over, trying to find some kind of logic to it all, but I kept coming up blank. My niece and I had never had issues. In fact, I thought we were close. I'd spent countless hours helping her, looking out for her, being there when she needed someone. It just didn't add up. That night, I barely slept. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the detective's face, heard my niece's accusation echoing in my head. The sheer unfairness of it all gnawed at me, and I kept swinging between anger and disbelief. How could family betray you like this? Why would someone I'd trusted do something so cruel? I kept thinking there had to be some explanation, some misunderstanding that could clear all this up. But deep down, a part of me was starting to fear the worst. My sister-in-law, her behavior, her willingness to back up this lie. Something about it felt too calculated, too purposeful. It wasn't just a misunderstanding or a mistake. It was starting to feel like an attack, a targeted attempt to ruin me. The next morning, I called in sick to work, too drained and distracted to even pretend I could get through a normal day. And as I sat there staring blankly at my phone, I realized I had a choice to make. I could try to push through, pretend this was all going to blow over, or I could start fighting back, digging into why they were doing this and exposing the truth. I didn't know what I'd uncover, but I was ready to find out. After that nightmare interrogation, I was left totally wrecked. I couldn't eat, couldn't sleep, couldn't focus on anything other than what my niece had said about me. I was trying to make sense of it all, but every thought just led to more frustration and confusion. How could a kid I'd helped so much suddenly turn on me like this? And why would my sister-in-law, my late brother's wife, back her up on something so out of line? The worst part was that the police hadn't just brushed it off after she'd said it. They were taking her seriously, investigating me as if I'd actually done what she claimed. The entire situation felt insane. I was just sitting there in my own home, my life now under a cloud of suspicion. Everything around me felt different, like my whole house was tainted somehow, and I couldn't shake the feeling that something darker was going on here, like there was some missing piece to all this I couldn't see. I couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't just a kid saying something dumb. It felt planned, like there was a reason behind it. But what? Then out of nowhere, I got a call from the detective handling my case. He told me they needed to bring my niece in for another interview, this time without her mother present. That caught my attention. I didn't know why they'd separate them, but if the police were thinking something was fishy, that was a bit of a relief. It was like a tiny crack of hope that maybe this whole thing would get cleared up. I don't know what went on in that room during her second interview. All I know is that, a couple of hours later, I got a call that changed everything. The detective sounded different, like he was suddenly on my side. He told me that my niece had admitted to making the accusation up. I felt the air leave my lungs. She made it up? I mean, I wanted it to be false, obviously since it was a lie. But hearing it confirmed was just something else. I felt a strange mix of relief, anger, and honestly, just pure betrayal. I asked him what she'd said, why she would lie like that, but he said he couldn't give all the details over the phone. All he told me was that her mom, my sister-in-law, had pressured her into it. Hearing that, I can't describe it. There's this saying, blood is thicker than water, right? But in that moment, I felt like my own family had thrown me under the bus without a second thought. My sister-in-law had pushed her own daughter, her own kid, to lie and say that I'd done something unforgivable. For what? It didn't make any sense. When I met with the detective in person, he laid it all out. My niece had confessed that her mom told her to make the accusation because they needed money, and my sister-in-law thought this would be an easy way to blackmail me. The entire plan was to force me into a corner where I'd be so scared of the damage to my reputation that I'd pay up, stay quiet, and save my own skin. I sat there, stunned, while he explained it. Every word was like a stab in the back. I'd always known that my sister-in-law had struggled with finances after my brother died. That's why I'd stepped in so many times to help. Groceries, clothes for my niece, a little extra here and there to make sure they were okay. And she'd turned that against me, weaponized it to try to squeeze even more money out of me. The detective explained that, in her statement, my niece said she'd tried to push back at first. She knew it was wrong, she said, and she was scared to do it. But her mom had told her that they had no other options, that this was the only way. Imagine that, a 13-year-old being told by her own mother to do something so messed up because it was the only way. I was disgusted. I'd always thought I knew my sister-in-law. I mean, she's family. She married my brother, and when he passed, I felt like it was my duty to step in, to be there for them. But hearing how she manipulated her daughter into saying something that could destroy my entire life, I couldn't wrap my head around it. How desperate. How selfish do you have to be to put your kid through that? The detective asked if I had any idea she might be in such deep financial trouble. I told him honestly that she'd mentioned money issues a few times, but nothing ever that extreme. She was always vague about it, saying she might need a little help, that sort of thing. And yeah, I'd helped her out before, but I had no idea she'd gotten to the point where she'd turn on me like this. I couldn't sit still. My hands were shaking, my mind racing. I kept thinking about all the times I'd trusted her, let her into my life, into my home. And now, knowing she was capable of this level of betrayal, it was unreal. I'd heard of people backstabbing each other for money, but this was my family. I never thought it had happened to me, let alone from the people I'd been bending over backward to help. And then there was my niece. I didn't know what to feel about her anymore. Part of me felt sorry for her. She's just a kid, after all. But she'd still gone along with it. She'd still let those words leave her mouth, knowing full well what they could do to me. I couldn't stop picturing her face, the kid I'd helped raise, now forever associated with a lie that nearly shattered my life. The detective told me they'd follow up with my sister-in-law, but he couldn't guarantee anything. He said that even with my niece's confession, it'd be tricky proving the extent of my sister-in-law's involvement, especially if she tried to deny it. I was furious, but also powerless. The thought that she might somehow dodge the consequences for all this made me feel sick. I thanked the detective, shook his hand, and left the station. I walked home in a daze, still trying to process everything. I felt like I was split in two. On one hand, I was relieved that my name was cleared, that the lie had been exposed. On the other, I was filled with rage and sadness. This was my family. My own flesh and blood had tried to ruin me for money. When I got home, I just sat there in silence, replaying every moment over and over. The relief of being proven innocent was there, but it was buried under layers of anger, betrayal, and hurt. I didn't know what to do next. All I knew was that things would never be the same again. After finding out the truth from the detective, I barely kept myself together. The fact that my sister-in-law had gone so far as to use her own daughter to frame me, it's hard to explain what that feels like. The shock, the anger, the betrayal, it all just hit me in waves. But at the core of it, I knew what I had to do. I had to confront her. There was no way I could let this slide without hearing her pathetic excuse for why she thought any of this was even remotely okay. I didn't even bother calling. I drove straight to her place, my mind racing the whole way. I kept thinking of every moment over the past few years, every time I'd helped her out, every dollar I'd given to make sure they were okay. And she turned around and did this? My blood was boiling, and I didn't even know what I'd say when I saw her. All I knew was that I needed answers. When I got there, she answered the door looking surprised but not scared, which somehow made me angrier. Here she was, standing there like she hadn't just tried to ruin my life. I barely managed to hold myself back from exploding right then. Instead, I looked her dead in the eye and said, "We need to talk. Now." She tried to play it cool, giving me a fake smile and asking if I wanted to sit down, like this was some kind of normal conversation. I wasn't having it. "Why?" I asked, cutting to the chase. "Why would you do this? Why would you push your own daughter to make up something that serious?" At first, she looked taken aback, like she hadn't expected me to be so direct. But then she recovered and gave me this tired, dramatic sigh. "Look," she said, "you don't understand how hard it's been. I'm a single mother, and things have been really rough since your brother passed. You have money, and I don't, and—" "Stop!" I interrupted. I didn't want to hear her excuses. "You tried to ruin my life. You told your daughter to accuse me of something disgusting. Do you have any idea what you were doing?" She crossed her arms and looked away, acting all defensive. "I didn't have a choice," she muttered, still not meeting my eyes. "You're well off, and we're struggling. I was desperate, okay? Desperate people do desperate things." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Desperate people do desperate things? That's her reasoning? "You thought dragging my name through the mud was an okay solution because you were low on cash?" I practically yelled. "I've helped you every single time you've asked, and this is how you repay me?" She rolled her eyes, which only set me off even more. "Oh, please. You act like you've done so much for us, but a few handouts here and there don't exactly solve all my problems. I needed real help." Real help? I couldn't stop myself from laughing at how absurd this was. "I've paid for groceries, clothes, school supplies, you name it. How much help were you planning to milk me for?" She stayed silent, but her jaw was clenched, and she finally looked up at me, clearly annoyed. "It's easy for you to say. You don't know what it's like, struggling day in and day out. I thought I thought if I could just scare you a little, maybe you'd finally give us what we actually need." "Scare me?" The word echoed in my head. "You wanted to scare me into handing over money by having your daughter accuse me of something unforgivable. Do you understand how messed up that is? Or have you lost all sense of reality?" Her face hardened and she said, "It wasn't supposed to go this far. I thought you'd just pay up quietly, maybe feel bad enough to help us out long term. You have to understand, I didn't mean for it to get out of hand like this." Get out of hand. I could feel my pulse pounding in my temples. "You told your daughter to accuse me of a crime, a crime. Did you even consider what this would do to me, or what it would do to her?" She looked away again, not saying anything. It was like she'd built up this wall around herself where nothing could get through. She had no remorse, no sense of the destruction she'd nearly caused. She just kept muttering about how tough her life was, as if that somehow justified everything. "I trusted you," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "I trusted you, and I trusted her. I've tried to be there for you both ever since my brother passed, and you used that against me. You weaponized your own daughter to try to blackmail me. Do you even hear yourself?" She huffed, finally meeting my gaze with an indignant look. "Fine, maybe it was a little extreme. But like I said, desperate times call for desperate measures." I shook my head, feeling a mix of anger and disgust that I couldn't put into words. "There's a difference between being desperate and being cruel," I said. "And what you did was downright cruel. You tried to ruin my life for money, and you dragged your own kid into it." She didn't respond, just crossed her arms and stared at the floor like some petulant child who'd been scolded. I realized then that nothing I said was going to get through to her. She convinced herself that she was the victim, that her actions were somehow justified because she was struggling. "You know what?" I finally said, unable to hold back the bitterness. "We're done. Don't call me for money. Don't ask me for help. You're on your own from here on out." That seemed to snap her out of her sulk. She looked up, eyes wide, and started protesting. "But, but what about my daughter? She needs stability. She needs a mom who doesn't use her as a weapon," I shot back. "And you clearly aren't that. You've made it pretty clear that you're willing to use her as a pawn if it suits you. So no, I won't be there to clean up your mess." She tried to guilt trip me after that, saying I was being too harsh, that my niece shouldn't suffer because of her mistakes. But I'd had enough. I told her I wasn't backing down, and I walked out. For the first time, I felt like I was actually breathing. The confrontation didn't give me any closure, though. If anything, I walked away feeling even more bitter. My sister-in-law had twisted things to make herself the victim, as if her struggles somehow justified everything she'd done. And the worst part was, she still didn't understand the damage she'd almost caused. I realized then that she didn't care about me or her daughter. She cared about getting what she wanted, no matter what it cost. When I got home, I felt drained. I thought confronting her would bring me some kind of peace, but all it did was make me realize how deeply she'd betrayed me. It was like a switch had flipped, and I finally saw her for who she really was, a manipulative, selfish person who would do anything to get her way. I didn't know what would happen next, but one thing was clear. I couldn't trust her ever again. After that confrontation, I felt completely drained. I thought finally calling her out and cutting her off would bring me some kind of closure, maybe even peace. But if anything, I felt even more rattled. It was like I'd spent the whole time talking to a wall. She had no remorse, no real understanding of what she'd done. The woman honestly thought she was the victim in all this. When I got home, I just sat in silence for a long time, replaying everything in my mind. I tried to brush it off, tell myself that I was free of her, that I didn't owe her anything anymore. But every time I thought of her twisted excuses, that lack of remorse in her eyes, something boiled up in me again. She'd almost ruined my life, using her own daughter to try to manipulate and extort me, and she acted like it was nothing, like I was the one being unreasonable for not handing over cash. That night, I barely slept. I kept thinking about the people I know, the people who might have heard about the accusations before they were cleared up. And even though the police had wrapped up the investigation with my name cleared, there was still this nagging feeling in the back of my mind that the damage was already done. People don't just forget things like that, even when the truth comes out. By morning, I knew what I had to do. I couldn't just let this go, not after what she'd tried to pull. It wasn't enough to cut her off and move on with my life. I had to hold her accountable. If she was willing to go this far once, who's to say she wouldn't try it again with someone else? And the worst part was, she dragged her own daughter into this mess. That kid deserved better than a mother who would teach her to lie and scheme to get what she wanted. I called the detective who'd handled my case, told him I wanted to press charges against her. He seemed a bit surprised at first, probably thinking that since the accusation had been proven false, I'd want to just move on. But when I told him everything she'd said during our confrontation, the blackmail, the manipulation, the way she'd pressured her daughter, he understood. He asked if I was sure. He warned me that pressing charges wouldn't be easy, that it would be a drawn-out process, and I'd probably have to relive a lot of what had happened. I knew that, and yeah, it scared me, knowing I'd be diving back into the mess I'd just barely crawled out of. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized I couldn't let fear keep me from doing the right thing. So I told him I was sure. Absolutely. This wasn't just for me, it was for my niece, too. That kid needed a wake-up call, something to show her that actions have consequences, even when you're being pressured by the person you trust most. And I hoped, maybe, it'd be a wake-up call for my sister-in-law as well, though honestly, I doubted she'd ever truly get it. The next few weeks were tense. The police had to go over everything again, take my statement in more detail, even ask me about past times I'd helped her financially. I had to drag up memories I'd tried to forget, and it was tough, but I kept reminding myself why I was doing it. I had to make sure this didn't happen to anyone else. I had to protect myself and anyone else who might have been her next target. Then, finally, the day came. The police showed up at her door and arrested her. I'll be honest, I didn't think I'd feel anything but relief, but the reality of it hit harder than I expected. This was still my family after all, my late brother's wife, my niece's mother, and now she was being taken away in handcuffs because of her own actions. But the thought of what she almost did to me, how close she'd come to wrecking my life, kept me grounded. This was on her. A few people heard about the arrest, of course. Family talk spreads like wildfire. I got calls from relatives asking what happened, telling me I was out of line, saying I should have just let it go. But I explained everything, from the accusation to the blackmail. And for the most part, people started to see things my way. Some still thought I was harsh, but others were shocked, especially when they realized my sister-in-law had used her own daughter to try and get to me. One relative actually told me, "You're doing the right thing, people need to learn there are consequences. That gave me some comfort, knowing at least a few people understood where I was coming from. The day after her arrest, I found myself thinking about my niece. I knew CPS would be involved now, that she'd probably be placed somewhere temporarily. Part of me felt responsible for her, guilty even, but then I remembered she'd been manipulated too. I couldn't protect her from the consequences of her actions, but maybe this would be her chance to see things clearly, to understand that her mother's actions weren't okay. But no matter how much I tried to rationalize it, it still stung. I had cared for that kid, treated her like my own, and she'd gone along with her mom's scheme without any thought for what it would do to me. It's not something you just get over. In the weeks that followed, I focused on rebuilding, trying to get back to some kind of normalcy. But the whole experience had left its mark. I was more cautious now, more guarded. Family didn't mean the same thing it used to. I'd learned the hard way that loyalty can be one-sided, and people you trust can turn on you for reasons you'll never understand. When I look back on that decision to press charges, there's no regret. I did what I had to do. I protected myself, and maybe in a way, I helped my niece too. I hope one day she'll realize that this was all because her mother took advantage of both of us. I hope it's a lesson she'll never forget. In the days after my sister-in-law's arrest, I felt like I was in this weird in-between place. Part relief, part regret, and a whole lot of anger that hadn't really gone anywhere. My family was pretty divided over what had happened. Some people thought I was completely in the right, and others thought I'd gone too far pressing charges against her, that I should have just let it slide and moved on. It was funny in a way. Everyone had an opinion, but no one really understood what I'd been through. I tried not to let it bother me. At the end of the day, I knew why I'd done it. I couldn't let what she did go unpunished, not when she'd come so close to destroying my life. And honestly, I hoped it would teach my niece a lesson too. But even knowing that, it didn't make things easier. My family, the people I thought I could count on, felt like strangers now. Going back to work was strange. For a while, I felt like I had this label stuck to me, like everyone could see what I'd been through even if they didn't know the details. I know it was all in my head, but I couldn't shake it. I was hyper aware of every interaction, wondering if people were thinking things or whispering behind my back. My boss and a few close friends knew what happened, and they were supportive, which helped, but it still felt like this heavy cloud was hanging over me. Every day, I'd replay everything in my mind, wondering if there was something I could have done differently. Could I have prevented this? Should I have been more cautious with my sister-in-law? Maybe not been so trusting? It's weird. Up until this mess, I'd always believed in being generous, especially with family. But now I couldn't help but question all of it. Had I been naive? Too willing to help? I'd always seen myself as a good guy, but I started to realize that sometimes being the good guy just makes you an easy target. About a week after the arrest, I got a call from a family friend who'd heard bits and pieces of what went down. She told me that my niece was staying in a temporary foster home, and I felt a pang of guilt I couldn't ignore. I knew she'd been manipulated, that her mom had put her in an impossible position, but that didn't erase the fact that she'd gone along with it. It's hard to look past that. Still, hearing that she was alone in a foster home hit me. No kid should have to go through that, even if they were part of something so messed up. Part of me wanted to reach out, to offer some kind of support. Maybe get in touch with her through CPS or see if there was a way I could check in. But every time I thought about it, I just felt this wall of anger go up again. I wasn't ready to forgive. Not yet. Maybe one day, but right then, the wounds were too fresh. And besides, I wasn't even sure what good it would do. She needed time to process everything, to understand the consequences of her actions, and I needed time to heal. Update. It had been a few months since everything had gone down with my sister-in-law, and for the first time in a while, I was beginning to feel like things were stabilizing. I'd put a lot of distance between myself and the whole mess, and while I still felt betrayed, I was getting better at managing it, at not letting it control my every thought. Life was finally starting to feel normal again, or at least as normal as it could after something like that. Then, one afternoon, I got a call from an unfamiliar number. I almost didn't pick up. I'd been dodging random numbers for a while, figuring they were either telemarketers or family members trying to stir things up. But something about this one made me answer. The voice on the other end was calm, professional. "Hello, is this my name?" "Yeah," I replied, still a bit guarded. "Who's this?" "This is Sarah from Child Protective Services. We have your niece in our care and wanted to speak with you about a potential option." Hearing that, I felt a cold shock hit me, and I braced myself for whatever was coming next. She went on, explaining that my niece had been in temporary foster care since my sister-in-law's arrest. Apparently, they'd reached out to other family members, but either they hadn't met the criteria or weren't interested in taking her in. So here they were, giving me a call to see if I would consider temporary custody. I I don't know, I stammered, feeling a rush of emotions that I wasn't ready to face. I'm not sure I'm the best option. Sarah was patient, letting me process everything. She explained that my niece's case was complicated, that she'd been through a lot with her mom, and that her environment hadn't exactly set her up for success. She sounded understanding, even sympathetic, like she knew how loaded this was for me. And maybe she did. She'd probably handled cases like this before. Look, she said after a moment, I'm not saying you have to decide right now. This is a difficult situation, and I understand there's been a lot of conflict. But as a family member, you'd have a chance to provide some stability for her, even if it's just temporary. I told her I'd think about it, and we agreed to talk again in a couple of days. When I hung up, I just sat there, staring at nothing, trying to wrap my head around it all. The idea of taking her in felt overwhelming. Part of me wanted to help her. She was just a kid, and she'd been through a mess of her own. But another part of me couldn't shake the hurt and betrayal of what she'd done, even if her mom had pressured her into it. The next couple of days were a whirlwind. I couldn't focus on work, couldn't really sleep either. The decision hung over me like a weight, making everything else feel insignificant. I kept going back and forth, trying to weigh the options. On one hand, she was still my niece. Despite everything that had happened, I'd watched her grow up. I remembered birthdays, holidays, the times I'd brought over gifts and groceries, knowing her mom was struggling to make ends meet. I'd cared about her as if she were my own daughter, and I couldn't deny that part of me still wanted to protect her, to make sure she had a shot at a decent life. I tried to convince myself that maybe, in the right environment, she'd have a chance to grow beyond what her mom had done. But on the other hand, I couldn't forget what she'd done. The accusation, the investigation, the sleepless nights and constant anxiety, the feeling of being on trial in my own life, the way she'd looked at me with that cold, rehearsed gaze, saying things that had nearly destroyed me. It was hard to see her as an innocent kid after that, no matter how much I told myself she'd been manipulated. Part of me knew she was just a pawn, that she'd done what she was told, but that didn't erase the damage. My friends had mixed opinions. Some told me it wasn't worth reopening that wound, that it would be too painful, too risky to bring her into my life after what had happened. Others said maybe it was an opportunity to make a difference, that if I took her in, I could be the positive influence she needed to turn things around. But none of them knew what it felt like to have your whole life threatened by someone you thought you could trust. None of them had been through that level of betrayal. Finally, I agreed to meet with her. CPS arranged a supervised visit at their office, and I showed up, nervous and unsure of what to expect. When I walked in, she was sitting there, looking smaller and more fragile than I remembered. Her eyes flicked up to mine, and for a second I saw a flash of fear, maybe even guilt. She mumbled a, "Hi," barely looking at me. I sat across from her, unsure what to say. She looked different, more closed off, almost guarded. It was like she'd built up walls around herself, walls I wasn't sure I could break through. But then, I realized I was doing the same thing. I was sitting there, my guard up, every instinct telling me to protect myself. I cleared my throat, trying to start the conversation. "How are you holding up?" It was all I could think to say. She shrugged, not meeting my eyes. "It's okay, I guess. Different." There was a pause, and then she added, barely a whisper, "I'm sorry." Hearing those words, I felt something tighten in my chest. I'd been waiting for an apology, hoping she'd own up to what had happened, but now that she'd said it, it felt hollow. Or maybe it was me that was hollow. I couldn't tell anymore. We sat there in silence, both of us awkward, unsure. When the visit ended, CPS asked if I'd come to a decision. I told them I needed a little more time, but on the drive home I realized I already knew my answer. I wanted to help her, I really did, but I also knew that having her in my life, under my roof, would be a constant reminder of everything I'd been through. I'd always wonder if I could trust her, if she was really sorry or just doing what she thought I wanted to hear, and that's no way to build a home. So a few days later, I called Sarah back and told her my decision. I wouldn't be taking her in. It wasn't an easy choice, and it definitely wasn't the one I'd imagined I'd ever have to make. But after everything, I needed to protect myself too. I hoped maybe that she'd find a place where she could learn from what had happened, where she could start fresh without the weight of her mom's mistakes hanging over her. It's hard to say goodbye to family, but sometimes you have to let go to move forward. Story 6. Girlfriend's best friend convinced her I'm toxic. She's stunned I dumped her over it. All right, so here's the deal. I'm a 28-year-old guy, been dating this amazing girl, Sarah, who's 26. We've been together for just over a year now, and for the most part, things are great. I'm really into her. She's smart, funny, all that good stuff. But there's this one thing that's been a constant thorn in my side. Her best friend, Jake. Now, don't get me wrong. I'm not the jealous type. At least I try not to be. I've always believed in giving people their space, trusting them, and all that. But with Jake, man, it's been tough. Jake is 27, and he's been Sarah's ride or die since college. I knew they were close from the get-go, and at first I didn't think much of it. Everyone's got a best friend, right? No big deal. But as time went on, I started noticing stuff. Like, they're not just close, they're really close. And I mean, the kind of close where it starts to feel like I'm tagging along in their relationship instead of being in one with Sarah. You ever feel like the third wheel? That's me, all the time. Let me paint you a picture. It's a random Tuesday night, and Sarah and I have plans to chill. I'm thinking we'll watch a movie, maybe order some food, just relax together. But nope, Jake calls, and suddenly she's all excited about going out for dinner with him. And just like that, my plans, gone. Not even a hey, wanna come with us? It's like I don't exist. And the thing is, this isn't a one-time thing. It happens a lot. They have these regular hangouts, dinners, movie nights, late night drives, the kind of stuff couples usually do. And every time I bring it up, she just says, "Oh, it's just Jake, you know how we are." Like, yeah, I do know. And that's kind of the problem. There's this one night I remember really well. We were supposed to have this chill evening, just the two of us. But guess what? Jake pops up again. He had a bad day, so Sarah feels the need to rush over and comfort him. And I'm sitting there like, what about us? But of course, Jake takes priority. And the worst part? When I do get to tag along, it's awkward as hell. Like, they've got their own little world with inside jokes and shared memories, and I'm just there, trying to keep up. You know that feeling when everyone's laughing at something, but you have no clue what's so funny? Yeah, that's me every time I'm with them. It's like they speak their own language, and I'm stuck trying to translate. At first, I tried to be cool about it. I told myself, they've been friends for years. It's not a big deal. You're being paranoid. But then I started noticing little things that didn't sit right with me. Like how Jake texts her all the time. I'm talking morning, noon, night. Even when we're together, her phone's buzzing with messages from him. And it's not just casual stuff either. He calls her babe and sweetheart. Who does that? One time we were out on a date and her phone kept lighting up with texts from Jake. I asked her about it and she just laughed, saying, "That's just how we talk. It doesn't mean anything." But it felt off. I mean, I'm her boyfriend. Shouldn't those pet names be reserved for me? Then there's the late night FaceTime sessions. I remember waking up in the middle of the night to find her whispering and giggling on the phone with him. I asked her about it the next morning and she said Jake was going through something and needed to talk. Okay, I get that. But why does he always need her? Why can't he talk to one of his other friends or, I don't know, deal with his stuff like a grown man? I know some of you might be thinking, dude, just chill, they're just friends. And trust me, I've tried. But it's hard when you feel like you're constantly playing second fiddle to someone else. I mean, isn't a relationship supposed to be about two people, not three? What really gets to me is how much I've bent over backward to be understanding. I've swallowed my pride, pushed down my insecurities, and tried to be the bigger person. But there's only so much a guy can take before he starts feeling like he's just a background character in someone else's life. It's not like I'm asking for much. I'm not saying she has to cut Jake out of her life completely. I get it, they've got history. But would it kill her to set some boundaries? Like maybe not prioritizing him over me all the time? Maybe not using pet names that make it seem like they're more than just friends? Is that really too much to ask? Honestly, I'm at my wit's end. I love Sarah, but this whole Jake situation has me questioning everything. I feel like I'm constantly walking on eggshells, trying not to come off as the jealous, controlling boyfriend. But at what point do my feelings matter? At what point do I get to say, hey, this isn't working for me? Another time, we were out on a date. We just sat down at this nice little restaurant, and things were going great. But then her phone buzzed. She glanced at it, and I could see her face light up. It was Jake, of course. She spent the next 10 minutes texting back and forth with him while I just sat there picking at my food. I finally asked her if she could put her phone away, and she looked at me like I was asking for the world. "It's just Jake," she said. "It's not a big deal." Not a big deal? It felt like I was sitting there alone while she was on a date with her phone. I started to feel like I was playing second fiddle to this guy, and it really started to mess with my head. Every time her phone buzzed, I'd get this sinking feeling in my gut, wondering if it was Jake again. Then there was the time we were planning a weekend getaway. We'd been talking about it for weeks, and I was really looking forward to it. It felt like a chance for us to just be together, away from all the distractions. But of course, Jake had to pop up again. He found out about this concert happening the same weekend and asked Sarah to go with him. And you know what she did? She asked me if we could reschedule our trip so she could go to the concert with Jake. I couldn't believe it. I mean, here we were planning this romantic weekend, and she was willing to push it aside for a concert with Jake. When I asked her why she couldn't just skip the concert, she got defensive. It's a band we both love, she said. I can't miss this with him. I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. Our relationship was supposed to be important, but it seemed like I was always getting the short end of the stick when it came to Jake. And it wasn't just the texting and the FaceTime calls. It was the way she'd light up whenever he was around, the inside jokes, the way she'd drop everything for him. I started noticing how much she'd change when Jake was in the picture. She'd be happier, more energetic, like he brought out a side of her that I couldn't reach. It made me feel like I was failing as a boyfriend, like I wasn't enough for her. But the thing that really got to me was how dismissive she was about my feelings. Every time I tried to bring up how uncomfortable I was with her relationship with Jake, she'd brush it off. "You're being ridiculous," she'd say. "Jake's just my friend. You don't have to worry about him." But how could I not worry when it felt like he was constantly in the middle of our relationship? It wasn't just about the pet names or the texts or the late-night calls. It was about the fact that I felt like I was competing for her attention, and no matter what I did, I always came in second place. I started to wonder if I was crazy for feeling this way, if I was just being insecure or jealous. But deep down, I knew something wasn't right. I wasn't asking her to cut Jake out of her life completely. I just wanted her to see how much it hurt me to always be pushed aside for him. But no matter how many times I tried to talk to her about it, she'd just dismiss my concerns and tell me I was overthinking it. It was like my feelings didn't matter, like I was just supposed to suck it up and deal with it. And that's when I started to realize that maybe this wasn't just about Jake. Maybe it was about something deeper. Maybe it was about the fact that Sarah didn't seem to care how her actions were affecting me, and that hurt more than anything Jake could ever do. All right, so I've been trying to keep things together with Sarah despite all the stuff with Jake. I've been telling myself that I just need to be patient, that eventually she'll see how much all this is affecting me. But let me tell you that patience finally ran out one weekend, and it wasn't pretty. So here's the setup. Sarah and I had been planning this anniversary trip for months. We were both super excited about it, or at least I thought we were. We had everything mapped out, a cozy little cabin, some hiking, just the two of us getting away from all the noise. It was supposed to be our time, you know? A break from all the everyday crap, and hopefully from Jake too. But a few days before we're supposed to leave, Sarah drops a bomb on me. She's all like, "Hey, so Jake just found out about this concert happening that same weekend. It's this band we've both loved forever, and he really wants me to go with him." I'm sitting there, kinda stunned, waiting for her to say, "But of course I told him no because we have our trip." But nope. Instead she goes, "Do you think we could reschedule our trip so I can go?" Reschedule? I couldn't believe what I was hearing. This was our anniversary, something we had been planning for months. And now she wants to just push it aside for a last-minute concert with Jake? I tried to keep calm, but I could feel the anger bubbling up. I asked her, "Why can't Jake just go by himself or with someone else? Why does it have to be you?" She gave me that look like I was being unreasonable. "You don't get it," she said. "This band means a lot to us. It's like a once-in-a-lifetime thing. I can't miss it." And there it was. The moment I realized where I really stood in this relationship. It was like no matter what, Jake was always going to come first. I told her straight up, "Sarah, this isn't okay. You're asking me to step aside for Jake again. It feels like I'm constantly competing with him for your time and attention, and I'm tired of it." But she just brushed it off, saying I was overreacting and that it wasn't a big deal. "You knew Jake was part of my life when we started dating," she said. "Why are you trying to change me now?" That hit me hard. I wasn't trying to change her. I just wanted to feel like I was a priority too. Like our relationship actually mattered. But in that moment, it felt like I was asking for too much. She was so defensive, like she couldn't even see where I was coming from. Then she said something that really got under my skin. "Jake thinks you're being controlling and insecure," she told me. Oh, great. Now Jake's weighing in on our relationship? Like, why does his opinion even matter here? This was supposed to be about us, not him. I told her I needed some boundaries. No more pet names with Jake, no more constant one-on-one hangouts, and definitely no more prioritizing him over our relationship. But she blew up at me. She called me controlling, said I was being toxic. It was like she couldn't even hear me. All I was asking for was some basic respect. But to her, I was the bad guy. We fought for what felt like hours. I kept trying to explain how I felt, how much it hurt to always be the second choice. But she just kept doubling down, insisting that I was the one with the problem. She even said, "If you can't handle Jake being in my life, maybe this isn't going to work." That was the moment I knew we had hit a breaking point. I couldn't keep pretending that everything was fine. I couldn't keep ignoring how much this was hurting me. I loved Sarah, but I couldn't keep sacrificing my own happiness just to keep the peace. It wasn't fair to me. After that fight, she started giving me the silent treatment. I was left alone with my thoughts, replaying everything over and over in my head. I kept asking myself if I was really the one in the wrong, if maybe I was being too sensitive or controlling. But deep down, I knew that wasn't it. I wasn't asking for anything crazy. I just wanted to be treated like I mattered. I started thinking about all the times I had put her first, all the times I had made sacrifices for our relationship. And what did I get in return? More time for Jake, less time for me. It felt like I was fighting a losing battle, and no matter how hard I tried, I was never going to win. That weekend was supposed to be a celebration of us, a chance to reconnect and strengthen our relationship. But instead, it turned into another reminder of how far down the priority list I was. I realized that I couldn't keep living like this. Something had to change, or I was going to lose myself completely. And that's when I decided to give her the ultimatum. I didn't want to, but I felt like I had no choice. It was either she set some boundaries with Jake, or we're done. I didn't know how she was going to react, but I knew I couldn't keep going like this. I needed to know if she was willing to fight for us, or if I was just wasting my time. In that moment, I felt a weird mix of emotions: sadness, anger, frustration, but also a strange sense of relief. I had finally spoken my truth, laid everything out on the table. Now it was up to her to decide what she wanted. And honestly, I wasn't sure if I was ready to hear the answer. All right, so after the fight about the concert, I knew something had to give. I was done being the guy who gets pushed aside every time Jake decided he needed Sarah's attention. I loved her, sure, but I couldn't keep feeling like a distant second in my own relationship. It was draining me and I couldn't take it anymore. That's when I knew I had to draw a line. Now I didn't go into this thinking, hey, I'm going to drop an ultimatum and fix everything. Honestly, I didn't even like the idea of it. I've always thought ultimatums were a last resort, something people do when they're desperate. But at this point, I was desperate. I needed her to understand how much this was messing with me. So one evening, I sat her down. No distractions, no phones buzzing with texts from Jake, just us. I tried to stay calm, but I was nervous as hell. I didn't know how she was going to take it, but I couldn't back down now. I told her straight up, "Sarah, we need to talk about Jake." She sighed, clearly annoyed. "We've already talked about this," she said, brushing me off like it was no big deal. But it was a big deal, to me at least. "I know we've talked," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "But nothing's changed, and I can't keep doing this. I feel like I'm constantly fighting for your attention, and Jake always wins." She rolled her eyes, which, let me tell you, did not help. "You're being ridiculous," she said. "Jake's my best friend. He's always been there for me. You knew that when we started dating." "I did," I admitted. "But I didn't know it would feel like this. Like I'm just a placeholder in your life while Jake gets all the important parts." That seemed to get her attention, at least a little. She frowned, but she didn't interrupt this time, so I kept going. "I'm not asking you to stop being friends with him," I said. "I get that you two are close, but there need to be boundaries. I'm your boyfriend, Sarah. I should be the one you turn to first, not him." She crossed her arms, clearly on the defensive. "What kind of boundaries?" she asked, almost challenging me. "No more pet names," I said, ticking off my points. "No more constant one-on-one hangouts, and definitely no more prioritizing him over me. If we're together, I need to feel like I matter. Like I'm not just some guy you're killing time with until Jake's free." Her face was hard to read, but I could tell she wasn't happy. "So what? If I don't do this, we're done?" she asked, her tone sharp. I hesitated, but only for a second. "Yeah," I said, feeling a lump in my throat. "If you can't do this, then maybe we shouldn't be together." Silence. She just stared at me, and for a moment I thought she might actually take it seriously. But then she shook her head and laughed bitterly. "You're giving me an ultimatum?" she said, incredulous. "That's not fair." "I know it's not ideal," I admitted, "but I don't know what else to do. I've tried talking to you about this and nothing's changed. I'm not trying to control you, Sarah. I just want to feel like I'm your partner, not some extra in your life." She didn't say anything for a while, and the silence was brutal. I could feel the weight of everything hanging in the air, and it was suffocating. Finally, she spoke. You're asking me to change who I am, she said quietly. No, I said, shaking my head. I'm asking you to see how this is affecting me. I'm asking you to meet me halfway. She looked down at her hands, and for a moment, I thought she might actually consider it, but then she sighed and said, Jake thinks you're being controlling. That hit me like a slap in the face. Jake thinks, seriously, why does his opinion matter so much? This isn't about him. It's about us. She didn't have an answer for that, and the silence stretched on again. I could feel the anger and frustration bubbling up inside me, but I forced myself to stay calm. Losing it wouldn't help. I don't want to be the bad guy here, I said softly. I just want to be with you, without feeling like I'm competing for your attention. Sarah looked up at me, and for the first time, I saw something shift in her eyes. Maybe it was guilt. Maybe it was realization. I don't know. But she didn't say anything more. She just nodded slowly, like she was processing everything. I need to think about this, she finally said, her voice barely above a whisper. Take all the time you need, I replied, standing up. But know that I'm serious, Sarah. I can't keep going like this. With that, I walked out, leaving her sitting there in the quiet. I didn't know what was going to happen next, but I knew I had done everything I could. Now it was up to her, and whatever she decided, I had to be ready for it. I wasn't really sure what to expect after dropping that ultimatum on Sarah. Part of me thought she'd just walk away, maybe even run straight to Jake. I'd prepared myself for the worst, but what happened next? Honestly, I didn't see it coming. It was Saturday night, a couple of days after our big fight. I was sitting at home, mentally gearing up for whatever was about to go down. I wasn't expecting her to show up at my door, but there she was, looking nervous and clutching her phone like it was some kind of lifeline. Can we talk? She asked, her voice softer than usual. I stepped aside to let her in, my heart pounding in my chest. I didn't know if this was going to be another fight or what, but I knew we couldn't just leave things hanging the way they were. She sat down on the couch, fidgeting with her hands. I've been thinking a lot about what you said, she started, not quite meeting my eyes. About Jake, about us. I stayed quiet, waiting for her to continue. I didn't want to push her, but I wasn't about to let her off the hook either. She had to face this head on. I canceled the concert, she said, finally looking up at me. I told Jake I couldn't go. That threw me off. I didn't expect her to actually cancel. Why? I asked, trying not to sound too hopeful. She took a deep breath. Because I realized you were right. I've been putting Jake before you, and that's not fair. I didn't see it before, but now, I get it. I could see she was struggling with the words, like admitting this was physically painful. But she kept going. I've been selfish, she admitted. I've been so caught up in my friendship with Jake that I didn't stop to think about how it was affecting you. And I'm sorry. Hearing her say that was like a weight lifting off my chest. But at the same time, I couldn't help but wonder if it was too little, too late. Why now? I asked. Why did it take an ultimatum for you to see this? She hesitated, then said, Because I was scared. I didn't want to lose you, but I also didn't want to lose Jake. I thought I could have both without any problems, but I was wrong. Her honesty hit me hard. I could see she was being sincere, and that wasn't easy for her. But I wasn't about to just sweep everything under the rug because of a few heartfelt words. I appreciate the apology, I said slowly. But this isn't just about the concert. It's about everything. The texts, the pet names, the late-night calls. It's been building up for a long time, Sarah. She nodded, tears welling up in her eyes. I know, she whispered. And I don't want to keep hurting you. I want to fix this. I want to be better. It was a lot to take in. I could see she was genuinely trying, but trust isn't something you can rebuild overnight. It's going to take more than just words, I told her. I need to see changes. I need to feel like I'm a priority in your life. I understand, she said, wiping away a tear. And I'm ready to show you. I want to spend this weekend together, just us. No distractions, no Jake. I want to make things right. I wasn't sure what to say. Part of me was still guarded, not wanting to get my hopes up. But another part of me wanted to believe that maybe, just maybe, we could turn this around. All right, I said finally. Let's see how it goes. She gave me a small, tentative smile, like she wasn't sure if I was being serious. But I was. I wanted to give her a chance to prove herself, even if I wasn't sure if it would be enough. We spent the rest of the evening just talking. No big plans, no distractions, just the two of us trying to reconnect. It was awkward at first, but as the night went on, it started to feel better, like maybe we were finding our way back to each other. She opened up about her friendship with Jake, telling me things I didn't know before, how he'd been there for her during some tough times, how their bond had formed over shared struggles. It helped me understand why she valued him so much, even if it didn't completely excuse her actions. And I shared my side too, how it felt to be sidelined, to always come second to someone else. I told her how much it hurt to feel like I wasn't enough, like I was just an afterthought in her life. By the time we went to bed, I felt emotionally drained, but also lighter. It wasn't like everything was magically fixed, but it was a start. We were finally having the conversations we should have had a long time ago. The next morning, she made us breakfast, and we spent the day just being together. No Jake, no interruptions, just us. It felt good, but I knew it was going to take more than one good weekend to fix what was broken. Still, for the first time in a long time, I felt like there was hope. Like maybe we could get through this if we both put in the effort. But I also knew I had to be cautious. I couldn't let myself get swept up in the moment and forget all the hurt that had brought us here. As the day went on, I found myself wondering what the future would look like. Could we really move past this? Would she be able to set the boundaries I needed? Or was this just a temporary fix for a bigger problem? I didn't have all the answers, but for now, I was willing to take things one step at a time. We still had a long way to go, but at least we were finally on the same page. And that, for me, was a step in the right direction. After our intense conversation, Sarah and I decided to spend the weekend together, focusing on us and trying to rebuild what had been falling apart. I was still on edge, unsure if anything could truly mend the damage, but I was willing to try. Friday night started off simple enough: dinner, a movie, and an effort to just be present with each other. We were cooking in my kitchen, some pasta dish that didn't require too much effort. It felt nice, almost like we were back in the early days when things were easy and light. We were laughing, making small talk about random stuff, and for a moment, it felt like we were on the right track. But then, halfway through the meal, Sarah put her fork down and gave me this look, the kind of look that tells you something big is coming. "I need to tell you something," she said, her voice quieter than usual. My heart skipped a beat. I braced myself, thinking she was about to drop another bomb about Jake, or maybe something else entirely. The air felt heavy as I waited for her to continue. "I'm pregnant," she finally said, barely above a whisper. I froze, my mind scrambling to catch up. "You're pregnant?" She nodded, her eyes already welling up with tears. "I just found out a few days ago. I wasn't sure how to tell you. I've been scared." At first, I was just in shock. Pregnant? It wasn't something we had talked about, at least not seriously. But as the words sank in, I felt a wave of emotion wash over me. Surprise, sure, but also a strange mix of happiness and anxiety. I stood up, walked over to her, and pulled her into a hug. Wow, I said, still trying to process. "That's amazing." She clung to me tightly, and for a moment everything felt right. This was huge, life-changing even, but it also felt like it could be the start of something good, something that could bring us closer together. The rest of the night was spent talking about what this meant for us. We sat on the couch, hands intertwined, discussing everything from baby names to how we'd handle the practical stuff. Money, space, telling our families. Sarah seemed genuinely happy, and I started to believe that maybe this was exactly what we needed to move forward. But as the initial shock and excitement began to settle, a nagging thought started creeping into my mind, something I couldn't shake no matter how hard I tried. The next morning, we went out for a walk. It was one of those crisp, cool mornings that made everything feel a little more alive. We talked more about the baby, what the future might look like, but that nagging thought was still there, lurking in the back of my mind. After we got back to my place, I noticed something odd. Sarah's phone, which was usually buzzing every few minutes with texts from Jake, was eerily silent. No calls, no messages. I didn't say anything at first, but it was strange. Jake had been such a constant presence, always texting, always needing something. Now, nothing. As the day went on, I couldn't help but notice how much calmer Sarah seemed. No distractions, no checking her phone nervously. It was almost too quiet. I tried to push it out of my mind, to just focus on us and the baby, but the doubts wouldn't let go. That evening, while we were sitting on the couch, I finally asked her about it. "Hey, I've noticed Jake hasn't been around much lately. Is everything okay with him?" Sarah hesitated for a moment before responding. "Yeah, he's just giving us space," she said, her tone a little too casual. "He knows we're working through stuff, so he's backing off for now." It sounded reasonable enough, but something about it felt off. Jake wasn't the type to just step back, not after how involved he'd been in our lives. And then the thought hit me like a punch to the gut. What if Jake knows something I don't? What if that's why he's gone quiet? I didn't bring it up right away, but the doubt kept growing. I replayed everything in my mind: the sudden apology, the pregnancy announcement, Jake's absence. Was there more to this story? Was it possible that Jake had been more than just a best friend? And now, knowing about the baby, had he decided to step back because he thought it might be his? Sunday morning, I woke up early, unable to shake the thoughts. I lay there, staring at the ceiling, trying to make sense of everything. Sarah was still asleep beside me, looking peaceful, unaware of the storm brewing in my head. As I got up and made coffee, I kept going over the timeline in my mind. If Sarah had just found out she was pregnant, that meant the baby was conceived at least a couple of months ago, around the same time when things between us had been at their most strained, and she was spending a lot of time with Jake. The pieces started to fit together, and not in a good way. I couldn't bring myself to ask her outright, not yet, but the doubts were there, gnawing at me. Was this baby really mine? Or was it possible that Jake was the father, and that's why he had suddenly disappeared from her life? Throughout the day, I tried to act normal, but my mind was racing. I watched Sarah closely, looking for any signs that she might be hiding something. But she seemed genuinely happy, excited about the baby, and completely focused on us. It was confusing, to say the least. By Sunday night, I was emotionally drained. I knew I needed answers, but I wasn't sure how to get them without causing another fight. I didn't want to ruin what had been a good weekend, but I also couldn't keep these doubts bottled up inside. As Sarah was getting ready to leave, she noticed I was quieter than usual. "You okay?" she asked, concern in her eyes. "Yeah," I lied. "Just tired, I guess." She gave me a long hug before heading out, and as I watched her walk away, I felt a mix of emotions: love, fear, doubt. I wanted to believe that everything was going to be okay, that we could move forward and be happy together. But those nagging doubts about Jake and the baby wouldn't let me rest. That night, I lay awake, staring at the ceiling again, knowing that sooner or later, I'd have to confront this head on. The question wasn't just about the baby or Jake, it was about trust, and right now, I wasn't sure where we stood. After Sarah left on Sunday night, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was seriously off. The whole weekend, I'd been trying to convince myself that we were making progress, that things were finally looking up. But the doubts were still there, gnawing away at me, especially about the baby. I couldn't sleep. My mind kept going back to how quiet things had gotten with Jake. The guy who couldn't go a day without texting or calling her was suddenly silent. It didn't add up. Something about it felt wrong, like there was more to the story than Sarah was letting on. That night, while I was sitting on the couch, her phone buzzed. She'd forgotten it on the coffee table. Normally, I wouldn't have even thought about looking at it, but my curiosity got the best of me. I hesitated for a second, then picked it up. I didn't go in looking for trouble, but I couldn't help myself. I opened her messages, scrolling down to her chats with Jake. And what I saw stopped me cold. Jake had blocked her. There was no profile picture, no recent messages, nothing. Just the notification that said he had blocked her. Why would Jake block Sarah, especially now? Confused and feeling sick to my stomach, I scrolled further back in their chat history. That's when I found the conversation that changed everything. It was a series of messages from a couple of weeks ago, just before Sarah told me she was pregnant. Sarah: "Jake, I'm pregnant." Jake: "What, are you sure?" Sarah: "Yes, I'm sure, I took a test." Jake: "It could be his, right?" Sarah: "I don't know, Jake, I'm scared." Jake: "If it's mine, I can't do this. I'm not ready to be a dad. You should think about getting an abortion." The messages kept going, but it was clear where Jake stood. He didn't want any part of it, and then, after that last message, he blocked her. Just like that. I sat there staring at the screen, my heart pounding in my chest. She told him before she told me. And the fact that she wasn't even sure who the father was, it hit me like a ton of bricks. All the doubts, the uneasy feelings I'd been trying to push aside, they all came rushing to the surface. She had been cheating on me. There was no other way to explain it. Everything made sense now. The sudden apology, her emotional breakdown, Jake's sudden disappearance from her life. She was hoping I'd never find out, hoping she could sweep it under the rug. I waited until the next morning to confront her. She came over, smiling like everything was fine, but I couldn't keep it inside anymore. "We need to talk," I said, my voice cold. She looked at me, confused. "What's wrong?" I held up her phone. "I went through your messages with Jake." Her face went pale. "You... what?" "I know, Sarah," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "I know you told him about the baby before you told me. I know he told you to get an abortion because he didn't want to be a dad. And I know you didn't tell me the truth." She started to cry. I didn't know how to tell you, she whispered. I was scared. I felt my hands clench into fists, not out of anger, but out of pure frustration. You didn't know how to tell me? You didn't know who the father was, Sarah. You were sleeping with both of us, and you didn't think I deserved to know the truth? She looked down, unable to meet my eyes. I didn't plan for this to happen, she said softly. It just got out of control. I shook my head. And you thought keeping me in the dark was the best way to handle it? She wiped her tears away, trying to compose herself. I was going to tell you, eventually. I just needed time. Well, guess what? Time's up, I said, my voice hard. We're going to figure this out right now. I want a paternity test. She nodded, still crying. Okay. We got the test done a few days later, and the results came back quickly. I wasn't the father. I knew it deep down, but seeing it in black and white was like a knife to the heart. When I showed her the results, she broke down again. I'm so sorry, she sobbed. I didn't know. I didn't know what to do. I couldn't even look at her. What about Jake? I asked. Have you told him? She shook her head. He refused to take a test. He doesn't want anything to do with it. That was it for me. I'd been through enough. Sarah, I'm done, I said firmly. I can't do this anymore. You lied to me, cheated on me, and now you expect me to stick around and help clean up the mess? I'm sorry, but I can't. She tried to grab my hand, but I pulled away. Please, she begged. We can fix this. No, Sarah, I said, my voice cold. There's no fixing this. I can't trust you anymore. I can't be with someone who lied to me like this. Don't contact me again. And with that, I walked away, leaving her standing there, sobbing. It hurt like hell, but I knew it was the right thing to do. I couldn't keep living in a lie, and I couldn't be with someone who didn't respect me enough to tell me the truth.